one of those "what have you done for me lately" things.
You still working for the school in any
Okay, it looks like it's 2:30, and we'll
Jayhawk mural out there on the north face.
call to order the study session for March 20th, and I'll look to staff to see who's presenting.
I'll make a quick introduction and turn it over to Development Services staff, but you may recall as part of our strategic planning conversation, we identified infill housing, we identified greenfield housing, and the apartment project that we're working on is very much more directed at greenfield. I think some of you as commissioners asked for a status update on where we're at on infill housing. Typically that's vacant lots or developed parts of town, and how to foster development or redevelopment in those locations. Staff's done quite a bit of research in terms of programs, peer communities, and they have briefed me a while back on what they found, and they're here to do the same for you. So I'll turn it over to Lauren Driscoll, and I see she has a couple of others with her to help with the presentation.
Am I on? Am I good? Thank you, City Manager Scragg. Amanda Barnett, our fellow with the Lead for Kansas program, is going to do the heavy lifting on the presenting today. I'm here just to kind of add bits and pieces, but a while back, you'll probably remember that as part of the Live Salina plan, there's not just one component to that, which is building new housing, both multifamily and owner-occupied, but also dealing with infill housing and neighborhood stabilization. And as you'll remember, and Amanda's going to get into this, that plan developed by RDG and Marty Schukert identifies that we start to make that transition into those programs by 2025. It may not seem like that has to be a discussion right now, but really it does. In order to apply for these grants, in order to prepare staffing and resources really to be ready to go in 2025, we have to have these conversations right now. So as part of Amanda's 2-year fellowship here with the city, she has been working with me, looking at our housing incentive programs, and then also looking at, all right, how do we look at the infill approach, because it is different than our new construction or greenfield building. So with that, Amanda, take it away.
Thank you. Again, Amanda Barnett. I'm an AmeriCorps Fellow through Lead for Kansas here at Salina. And tonight I will be talking about the infill renovation strategy. And like City Manager said, there has been a lot of research that went into it. We had visited a couple of neighboring Kansan towns and cities to find out what they were doing successfully. So a lot has been brought to the table as far as informing this strategy. The review of recent housing efforts. So the Live Salina Strategic Housing Plan recommended an adoption of incentives policy, which we have completed with that resolution, as well as an increase of residential units as per the plan and figure 13 of the development program. And some of the things that we have done as a city include the Southview Estates, Aeroplanes, Lee Lofts Phase 2 is pending, as well as the rental unit request for proposal is also pending as well. So now that those things are complete, we want to turn our attention and really kind of focus on the infill side of it and what can we do for our current residents. So with the map to infill housing, what has been done in the past, there's been various grants and for home rehab dating all the way back to the 1990s. In 2018, some of that fell off, and there were a couple of different programs that were activated, including the 2020 CBDG CV, so that's the COVID version of the CBDG grant. And then peppered in here is also where the plans that we have had as a city. So the 2010 comprehensive plan, the 2016 Live Salina housing plan, and then all of the various supplements to those housing plans have addressed infill housing, including and not limited to our recent 2022 budgeting session where we allocated $1 million of ARPA funding, the American Rescue Plan Act funding that we received to specifically go to infill housing. That brings us up to what have we done this year? And we've done a housing assessment tool and then also reviewed that tool with the housing council, essentially. It's the folks up at the state level and some of these various programs that kind of do a pre-meeting with communities who are looking at doing a full stack initiative like we are, and to figure out, okay, which programs actually qualify, which ones might you want to consider, and so on. So we had that meeting, which also informed some of these recommendations.
Yeah, I think that's worth adding a little bit of information about, because it's something we really haven't had a chance to talk to you about. In order to apply for a lot of these monies, we have to do some preliminary work. And one of the ones, particularly in the housing world, is the HAT and the HIAC. So literally, in order to engage in even the conversation of could we apply and how much money could we have and things like that, we haven't even applied, just talking about it. We had to have these conversations, which meant we reached out to stakeholders, got their feedback. We had to look at areas of interest. We had to pull a lot of the data. But I hope what you take away from this slide is we have done the work. This is not a surprise. These are recommendations that we have consistently come across. And the reason we were able to even do the HAT and the HIAC is because we've done all this work that you see on this timeline. We had a lot of this data. We were able to have this conversation. And the state and all those entities that met with us could recognize that we had a lot of good data to go off of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say the response was very positive. And really led to some of these infill housing goals. So what do we want out of infill housing? We want to be able to implement a housing goals and strategy from the Live Salina housing plan. So we have adopted recommendations that we want to stick to. Address neighborhood fortification with rehabilitation for owner-occupied as well as rental structures. Leverage allocated American Rescue Plan Act or ARPA funds. Find complementary grants to build and fund a funding structure that makes a meaningful impact, and then systematize the process to lessen the administrative impacts and improve the citizen experience. So why haven't we done this before? What have been some of the roadblocks? If you're a citizen, some of the roadblocks that you encounter is that the targeted communities don't have a lot of cash for repairs, and a lot of these programs have a rebate sort of situation where you have to foot the cash up front. Not so doable for some of these communities. Programs are complicated, confusing, and time-consuming. Assistance is often report-heavy and very restrictive on who can receive them. Multiple grants need to be needed in order to fix the real and bigger problems. So it just applying for one grant really just doesn't cut it for some of these structures. Citizens are typically not able to apply directly, and they need an intermediary such as the city. And then fear of increased property taxes after the improvements are made. They're on a fixed income, they can barely make ends meet anyway. Why would I fix my property and then give myself a higher tax bill? Totally understandable. As far as the city, why haven't we done something? Well, programs require match money often. Programs are not targeted enough. Which means that it's a little bit too peppered around the city to make a meaningful and visible impact. Programs are resource heavy, so that's both on the time in order to administer them, the time in order to make sure that the money gets into the citizen hands, etc. Just resource intensive. And then infill strategies require a long-term commitment for housing stability. It's a marathon, it's not a sprint, and we certainly have been sprinting recently based off of the housing crisis that we've been faced. All right, so what are we going to do about it? As an overview, we have 4 objectives that we wanted to stick to. We wanted to make sure that we had some strategic partnerships. So North Central Regional Planning Commission, Federal Home Loan Bank, Kansas Department of Health and Environment, as well as some utility companies, as well as some nonprofit partners. So making sure that this is not a just singular effort, but really as a community we band together and put forth the effort necessary. Objective 2, layering grant funding. Just as I had stated before, as far as what are some citizen hurdles, layering grant funding has been proven to really make a demonstrable impact and really address the underlying issues. So one grant at a time doesn't necessarily cut it. And so we have the resources and the capabilities in order to stack those grants so that a citizen can apply I'm actually jumping ahead to objective 4, sorry. But layering grant funding so that there's a larger pool of money and a larger set of resources. Objective 3, database target location. So we don't want it to just be based off of opinion or solely our heartstrings. Of course, people need help and we want to be there for them, but the data needs to support it. And then objective 4, accessible for the average citizen. So being able to take those layered grants, the multiple grants, and have the citizen experience just one application, and we can take care of the rest. So diving in a little bit to objective number 1, strategic partnerships. North Central Regional Planning Commission has the ability to co-administer some of these grants. We need bank partnerships in order to access one of the grants specifically, the Federal Home Loan Bank Program, which is one of the larger options as far as the grant dollars. KDHE will play an integral role in some of the lead and hazardous materials mitigation plan. Kansas Gas has offered to partner with us both on the data side, so being able to actually see the effects of home renovation, specifically in the utility bill, as well as they have some temporary weatherization kits that they can kind of send out in the meantime while we're kind of waiting to do the actual construction work. City and Public Works, part of these grants is actually improvements of the street sidewalks and lighting. That is part of the CBDG or Community Development Block Grant. The City of Salina, we have the Neighborhood Revitalization Plan, which has been approved for quite some time, and it's a way to help mitigate some of those post-repair tax worries for the citizen. Nonprofit partners, we have consumer credit counseling for financial literacy. Some of the grants require us to be able to provide, not necessarily require, but make available some financial literacy courses. Financial assistance, should any of the citizen want to kind of take the next step as far as putting forth effort into their own finances, we have a potential available partnership with Interfaith for their cash IDA program. And then, of course, we have the Community Development Housing Organization for our county weatherization and potentially to do the work for some of the state weatherization dollars.
I think one of the things that we should take away from objective 1 is the thing that I've heard from the commission over time is this is a really big problem. And we're not the only ones who are interested in it. We're not the only ones working on it. Like, where do we fit in, right? Is it all on our backs? Like, how do we fix that on our own? Well, this slide shows you it's not just us on our own. And in part of analyzing this challenge and looking for solutions was going, okay, what do we do best? And where do we fit in? And how do the things that we bring to the table are best placed in this solution? We're good administrators. We have people that process applications. We have people who know how, to do the accounting to these things. We have people who can go out and inspect buildings. We're maybe not gonna make the repairs, but we have partners who could do that. We aren't specializing in weatherization, but there are partners that do that. Some of this is about financial health, right? Once you get these repairs made, because we're talking about low-income neighborhoods, is there a way to strengthen that financial health of that individual in addition to making those repairs? Not our area of specialty, but there are partners who do that. And part of bringing this together is let's create kind of a one-stop shop. We've got an office open 8 to 5. We have systems that allow people to apply online for things. Those are things that we can do. So not gonna solve all the problems, but we can definitely solve the problem with the resources that we have.
Yep. Any questions so far?
The Salina grace of infill housing, is
Right.
that kind of my takeaway there? That the city could coordinate that from all
Yes.
aspects.
It is definitely not limited to other programs, and I think Amanda definitely has that listed in here, but these were ones that either are known and functioning right now and allow another entity like us to apply for them. But I think part of the approach is having that one-stop shop, right, with an application, that there are other programs that come online that we need to connect somebody to, that can definitely be brought in throughout that process.
Definitely. All right, moving on to objective number 2. Yes.
I know Chodo's done a lot of this weatherization and improvements, but how do people find out about what's available?
That will definitely be part of the planning and implementation part of what's happening. I believe today is just really a informative of like, hey, this is the research that we've gotten, this is what is available, can we go build the thing?
Yeah, this
And-
is our suggested direction.
Yeah.
Well, what we really need from study session today is, does it sound like we're on the right track for this strategy? And that's why we've got these 4 objectives. And if you guys are okay with that, then we'll start going down that road, Commissioner Longbine, and saying, okay, this is the type of marketing that would need to be done. I mean, many of these entities already have some of their own marketing going on, for instance, through the Chodo or Federal Home Loan Bank. But what would, how we bundle this together, how would we get that out is definitely something that would be part of implementation.
Thanks for the question. All right, objective 2, layered grant funding. As Lauren was talking about, these are some of the identified sources of funds that have interest in infill renovation, that have money available, that when we were talking with the council during the HIAC conversation, these things were highlighted as potentials. So we have the American Rescue Plan Act, the Homeowners Assistance Fund dollars, we have the Community Development Block Grant, Federal Home Loan Bank Affordable Housing Grant, and state and county weatherization programs, as well as HUD, 2 HUD programs, the Healthy Homes Program, as well as the Veteran Home Rehab Program. And I also added that we'll continue searching and add grants as they are complementary and available. So what does this look like? A big table. So the first 2 that I'd like to focus on are the 2 that are administered, and the funding source is the city of Salina. Those got backwards. Okay, there it is. So the first 2 is the America Rescue Plan Act dollars, as well as the Homeowners Assistance Fund. These have the lowest set of barriers because there already are funds. So we can decide what they are, we can decide what we spend money on, and we can decide all of those limitations and restrictions and parameters internally to us, which is good news. The next 2 really are the ones that have, these 2 kind of make the basis for the rest of the program. Not only because they are large dollar amounts, but also because they can be co-administered. So we have the CBDG or Community Development Block Grant and the Affordable Housing Program through Federal Home Loan Bank. And so these 2 programs together, even at the HIAC conversation, they were saying that they play really well off of each other, and some of the things that CBDG cannot pay for, AHP can, and vice versa. So if we have an applicant who, says, hey, I have this list of 7 things, then we get to go through and say, okay, what are those things, and really allocate the money from each grant based off of the need, as well as, of course, the grant limitations.
They also do co-administration. So CDBG has enough of a coordination where they see people also working with Federal Home Loan Bank on these same type of projects, that the reports we would submit for CDBG are very similar and just get sent right over to Federal Home Loan Bank and vice versa. So we're kind of killing 2 birds with 1 stone. So the programs are meant to be compatible. And if you're looking at these dollar amounts, like, we've typically never done more than $10,000 per repair, kind of smaller stuff, which if you're talking about foundations, roofs, electrical, that's not enough money to make the impact we really need to see. Front porches and a window or 2 are important, but we're talking about stabilizing neighborhoods. And that means that once somebody's in that home, it's not just pretty, it's not just safer, it's also more affordable because it's well insulated, it has good HVAC, it has a roof that doesn't have holes, all those things that are really important so that somebody can stay sustainably in that home and continue to strengthen that neighborhood. So we have, just for those of you that have been around a while, Salina has previously had a CDBG home loan bank back in the day, like late 90s, early 2000s. That program pretty much went away. Nobody was doing that CDBG home loan grant repair program, but they have since revised that through CDBG, which is HUD dollars that come down to the state. So that is why we're able to kind of bring that program back forward. Plus the fact that we have the ARPA dollars that you have identified, $1 million for infill housing, allows us to have match money we have never had before. And I cannot emphasize enough, one of the things that has been there about why haven't we done more, why is infill housing hard to get to? Because it requires cash. And we really haven't had that opportunity. So that $1 million here is getting leveraged a lot to do these things.
Yep. And speaking of the max spend per unit, if we do the max allowable based off of the grant alone, we could support homeowners with $127,000 per home, which, if we got everything we asked for, would only serve 57 homes. If instead we did the minimum based off of the allowable applications for the grants, we would only be offering $27,000 per home, but be able to reach 271 homes. So to Lauren's point, 10,000, 20,000 really just hasn't been enough in the past in order to truly impact the structural integrity of the home and the long-term stability of a neighborhood. So we're estimating that it's going to be somewhere in the middle. And we have a calculation for that later on in the presentation where we get kind of down to the brass tacks of what is this gonna take. But just to give you some guide rails of like, okay, here's the max bracket that we will be able to help between 57 and 270 households.
The other important thing to remember with both CDBG and the Federal Home Loan Bank program is those are grants. And they are an upfront money to allow for these things to happen, which is usually a challenge. Everything tends to be, you have to have the money, go make the repairs, bring the receipts back, and that's not always gonna work for everybody. So the combination of this program where it brings some of that money front is definitely something that impacts who can actually do this. Just because you qualify doesn't mean you have the money to be able to do it. So that's been a huge challenge for us in the past. And then the other two programs dealing with weatherization and then dealing with healthy homes and VA, those are basically, there's no reason to not include those programs around these cores. So if you come in and apply, we can write the application to go, oh, VA qualified, you got your DD 214, okay, yep. Sweet, you can qualify for this one. There's no reason to not have you apply for this at the same time. Not everybody's gonna be eligible for VA, right? Or if you meet some of the requirements for healthy homes, there's no reason to not take that same stuff, put you into the queue to apply for that for possible more money. Not everybody would apply or could qualify, but we've got these core programs and then we can tuck some of these others in. To Commissioner Longbine's point, how do you market some of this stuff? I'll tell you, at 20 years in government, it doesn't matter sometimes how you market this stuff. You can market till the cows come home and people they just don't see it in their busy everyday life. So if we can bring things to one point where we may have gotten them to come in for one thing, let's get you for all the things. Yeah. To make that just an easier, more cohesive experience for them.
Any questions so far?
Amanda, do you want to talk at all about CDBG and kind of the sidewalk lighting, money, and then maybe a little bit about just how the NRA would impact these programs?
Absolutely. I can absolutely do so. So underneath that dark line is CBDG-S, and that is designated as the money for the infrastructure, sidewalks, street repair, some lighting. And this one is specifically dollars to help the city do those repairs. It does require a match, so it does require $100,000 to be spent by the city. But then $200,000 would be added in by this grant in order to do some of those kind of shared infrastructure sorts of things that just make a neighborhood safer. So lighting, even sidewalks, streets without potholes, stuff like that.
It's a good chunk of money, and part of what we're going to talk about is having a targeted area. That was something that consistently came across the board with all the money. You got to pick a spot. Like, all those programs have been around long enough to go, you can't just throw this stuff everywhere. You've got to find a concentrated spot to start, because all the added benefits from stabilization only occur when you actually have a concentrated area. And we've got several maps we're going to show you. It's not a tiny area, but it has to be cohesive enough that you see the impact. And part of those conversations we had with other places, such as Topeka, such as Lyons, Kansas, such as Garden, is if you spread it out too much, you don't get the benefits. So what CDBG is saying is, hey, you've got this area, not only are you seeding it with stabilized homes, but let's make sure the sidewalks are ADA compatible and not broken up from trees, because that's often one of those things that gets forgotten, right, in repairs. Let's make sure that we've got up-to-date ramps. Do we need safer lighting? All the things that when you go to a neighborhood and you think, oh, this one makes me feel good. Trees are all trimmed, all those things. You can spend some of these dollars to not only impact just the houses, but that neighborhood as a whole to get that. And we can do that as part of our CDBG application. So it's kind of hard not to apply for that when we can leverage $100,000 to do that kind of an impact for a $300,000 impact in a neighborhood. And then, as we mentioned, our neighborhood revitalization area, as you may be familiar, I'm not sure what that sound is. It's a property tax rebate program. So first 5 years is 100% of that increased property tax, and then 50% break the following 5 years, so a 10-year program. But that does allow people to make that impact in their home. They're going to increase the value, which will in turn probably raise the taxes, but it gives some time to make up for that adjustment as other things around the neighborhood occur and everybody kind of rises at the same tide. So that's also something that we could do all those applications just at the same time.
When do we review the neighborhood revitalization map?
We are required to do that in June.
Of this year?
Correct.
Okay, because from looking at that, when we've looked at other areas, it seemed to me like that map maybe needs to be expanded some.
Yes,
That's just my own opinion, but.
No, staff has identified areas that we think should probably be brought into the map. It's been 5 years since it was last comprehensively updated. We've had some intermittent updates since then, but we'll start that process in June.
Because I know some individuals have bought properties, and we've talked about it, and I personally would have thought they fell within those neighborhoods, and they didn't. So, anyway.
No, and I mean, it's a great example of the application process. The NRA is very successful for commercial structures or multifamily. It is not very successful on the individual owner occupied. And one of the reasons is it's very cumbersome. You have to remember to apply every year. There's a variety of things in the process that staff's also identified that we think we could update, still stay within statute and program requirements, but make things a little bit easier and, efficient.
And it could be used on investment properties too, correct? Not just owner occupied?
Well, NRA, yes.
Yeah.
And then we have options in here that would also be able to be used for rental properties. Okay, next slide.
All right. Objective 3, where is this target area and how do we find it? So the method for identifying this target area, we wanted to look at the plans. So the comprehensive plan identified areas of North Salina, the Broadway corridor, as well as the southwest Salina area, so over like Schilling area. Live Salina Housing Plan also identified these areas. So they also identified other areas as well, but those three are the ones that are in common with both of them. And then based off of the grant requirements, the grant requires that the targeted area be within a distressed neighborhood. So what does distressed mean? I'll go over some of those requirements. A distressed neighborhood means classic signs include higher than citywide percentages of persons in poverty, higher than citywide percentage of properties with utility bill arrangements, so kind of payment plans with utility companies, higher than citywide percentages of emergency calls, higher than citywide percentages of code violations, significant renter population, older than citywide averages of home age, and home values well below the cost of new construction, making home repairs uneconomical and often unfinanceable. So, in addition to the distressed neighborhood, we're looking at, based off of grant requirements, an average population area that has, an average area population with 80% average median income or less. Children in the home, this is relevant to the HUD Healthy Homes grant, not all of them. Conditions, the condition of the property, so talking about the code violations. Property valuation, as compared to new construction. Property age, emergency call volume, utility target area for high utilization, and then the condition of the streets, curbs, lighting, sidewalks. So, what does this look like? So, this is a series of different maps that come from the various different plans. Can you go slower, please? So the first map is the 2010 comprehensive plan. This is the area of change and area of stability. This is a plan identified areas for infill renovation, would be the area of change, which is in the yellow. Next one is the 2018 program adoption for the neighborhood revitalization program area. As we discussed, it does need some updates, but this is the current map of where the neighborhood revitalization program is available. Third is in the 2016 housing plan. These are house values at or 60% of the moderate cost. So these are the ones where the home values are likely significantly less than the new construction value. Fourth picture is in the 2016 housing plan. This is the housing conditions map. So this is likely to indicate the higher than citywide percentages of code violations. And I did double check with our code enforcement folks, and it is true. It's still relevant, even though it was a 2016 map. Number 5 is the 2016 housing plan identified opportunity areas, and this combines the previous maps into kind of recommendation areas, including where should we do supportive action, so renovation on homes, where should we do infill reconstruction, so actually taking some places down and rebuilding, and so on. So these are in the 2016 housing plan. Number 6 is the median household income map, and it shows the highest highest median housing income for the Broadway corridor. Kind of, you can see based off of color coding, it really kind of tracks with the NRA, or on the NRP, excuse me. And number 7, we have the 2016 housing plan median age of the homes. This would indicate the older than citywide averages for the households. Again, really tracks with the neighborhood revitalization plan. And finally, last but not least, these are the 2023 qualified low and moderate income census tracts. So according to HUD themselves, these are the census tracts that ought to qualify for income restricted programs. So, target neighborhood, this is off of the Broadway corridor, and you will recognize some of these features. Go ahead and click one. These red indications, I'll just go kind of from top to bottom. The line down the center, that's the railroad. Then over in this corner, that's the Catholic Diocese. We have Cottonwood School in the middle. We have the food bank, and then we have that big parking lot shopping center with Ace Hardware in it. So the confines are State Street on top, south on the south end. We have 9th, kind of on the, what is that, east, and Broadway on the west. So the target neighborhood, looking at these kind of demographics and kind of layering them all in, you can go ahead and click again. We looked at it is a qualified census tract, so yes, has a high likelihood of qualifying. Total residential parcels in this, so our GIS mapper guy, Mr. Gainsmiller, excluded some of the commercial properties since this is going to be a residential renovation program. And we found that 769 total parcels. And then because we want to have local influence, we excluded the non-local owners of properties in that area, which is 104 parcels within that area. And that leaves us with a number of rentals and a number of owner occupies. So we have 282 rentals and 346 owner occupied. These numbers are very estimated. So what I did is I looked at the spreadsheet and I said, okay, what is the owner's address and does it match the property address? I'm 100% sure that there are some landlords that list their address as the property address, and so I'm sure that we're not getting some of the rental properties accounted for, and so it's definitely an estimate. Question.
Non-local is outside of the track area or outside of Salina?
Outside of Salina.
Okay.
So non-Salinan residents.
Just to kind of add a little to this square you're looking at was not staff throwing darts at a board. This really is those last two slides that Amanda went over going, okay, where are the plans identifying? Okay, within those identified areas and they overlap. Now let's look at these other distressed neighborhood qualities that we've got to have. We have to have the low LMI. We have to have children of a certain age. We have to have all these other things. And this is really kind of where we came down to. So there's a lot of data that's gone into this square track area.
So potentially this is where we get the most bang for the buck.
It's exactly what it's determined to do. And part of that HIAC and that HAP process that we went through with the state, they kind of had us run this exercise because they found that if you don't rein it in, you're not going to see the impact.
Yep. So how we
Were you able to confirm if all these houses are occupied? Because I remember in the state study, they said a big problem in Kansas was a lot of just empty houses.
Right. We have not been able to verify that yet as part of the validation process and making sure that this neighborhood is able to participate. That's going to be part of the question as we survey the neighborhood. That's some of the pre-work that is necessary for at least two of the grants, is that we actually have to survey the neighborhood identified to be served. And so that will be part of the questions.
When they mean survey, it means we go out with clipboards
Like
and say,
door to door.
hey, we're trying to fix some houses. This is how the program would work. Are you at least interested? And they won't accept our application until we have a certain amount of interested individuals. So, I mean, both Federal Home Loan Bank and CDBG are very concerned with not only does it have to have the right demographics, but are folks willing to do it? So that's an important part of the success of this.
Thanks for the question. How we determined the 314 estimated eligible. In order to be a qualified LMI census tract, 50% of the residents within that census tract need to be at or below 60% of average median income. So what we did is we took the number of rentals, number of owner occupants, so the remaining potentially eligible parcels, and divided it by half, presuming that at least half of the people that are eligible would also qualify to be LMI or 60% or less. The grants, most of the grants actually have a requirement of 80% or less, so we're fairly confident that we're going to be able to meet that. This is really just a, does the math work if we just use estimates and, have a conservative estimate even still?
Yeah.
Questions so far? Okay. Objective number 4. So who is the average applicant? What does the target applicant look like in this target neighborhood? For owner occupants, like I had mentioned, household income is 80% or less of average median income. And this is a sliding scale based off of family size. Have no tax delinquency, have no chronic code violations, and willingness to participate in the repairs. We actually do get a kind of a point check as far as having persons who are interested in helping with the process. That actually helps with some of the applications, specifically the applications that ask us to go door to door and ask people if they would be interested. Go figure. Owner comments. Owner commits to not selling their property for a period of time. That period of time is going to be determined. Some of the grants require different things, and so it's going to be necessary to understand where their money is coming from. But there is a requirement to retain the property, so you're not just turning around and selling it for a profit.
5 years is a pretty common number, but to Amanda's point, it just depends on, they come in for that one-stop shop. Where they get their funding may impact some of that. But Amanda, remind us, all those bullets are things that are required by the grant. The city is not making that recommendation.
Correct.
If you want the money, you have to meet these.
Correct.
Okay.
The two bullets actually over on the local investor and landlord column that are different, those are not grant specific, however, very in line with what we have required of people in the past as far as to receive public funding. So investors' primary residence need to be within city limits. To Commissioner Ryan's question as to what do I mean by non-local owners. So folks that are not within the city of Salina limits. Investors, we have identified 10 properties or fewer within city limits. As far as there's kind of that balance between, we want to support our local business owners, and landlords are business owners, and they pay quite a bit of property taxes depending on how many properties they own. And balancing that with it is a business, and at what point do we say we're funding businesses and private owners and whatnot. So striking that balance, we had quite a bit of research done. I looked up a fair amount of academic journals, and 10 seems to be that tipping point of being able to still invest in the little guy, but also be able to invest in landlords as opposed to exclusively owner occupants.
When it says 10 or fewer properties, how do multifamily properties, is that considered one if it's a multifamily property?
I think the idea is units. So let's
doors, basically.
Correct.
10 doors, as I
Yeah.
would say.
I mean, if you had 10 properties, all with 100 units each, I don't think that's the idea of who you're trying to help here.
Yeah,
That's,
agreed.
okay.
And then same sort of list over on the local investor side. No tax delinquency. Investor is willing to share in the cost of renovations. That is a grant requirement for quite a few of these. And then the tenant also has to qualify for this 80% or less of AMI. And then the investor commits to not displacing the current tenant, of course, unless they're already violating some other rule. And then renting to qualified persons for some time in the future, again, dependent upon the grant, but 5 years is very typical.
I do know it does say not tax delinquent on any of your properties. So you've got 10 properties, one of them has tax issues, you do not qualify. The 10 or fewer properties, that's, as Amanda said, part of research and recommendation. If the body wasn't comfortable with that number, you wanted 5, you wanted 25, that's something that's up to the city. But that is currently staff's recommendation based on research. Next
Okay.
slide.
Infill grant timeline. So going back to why is this discussion happening now? Why are we bringing this up? If the, Live Salina plan says, hey, we should do this in 2025, why are we talking about it in 2023? And a lot of that has to do with some of the application deadlines. So these are the main ones that we want to build as far as the foundational piece of it. So that's the ARPA money. The HUD Healthy Homes actually has a really coming up deadline. They extended their deadline. It actually used to be August of 2022, but they have extended their deadline until May 2nd of 2023. So we have a chance to get these funds that we would otherwise have missed. And it does, HUD Healthy Homes does require the survey. So that is going to also be part of it as to, we wanted to get the commission direction of yes, proceed before we send me out to go door knocking before May 2nd. So
Who's gonna do the door knocking?
Staff.
probably a lot of me.
You too?
Well, no, and probably I can wrangle the compliance guys. We'll just see. I mean,
Yeah.
I think Michelle's interested.
yeah. I'll promise pizza or something. I don't know. We'll get it figured out, but we will get out there.
Yep. So this is kind of a picture of what are the deadlines. And I also wanted to draw your attention over to the last three columns. Admin fees. This is assuming we get the maximum amount. What is the maximum allowable administration fee? And these are legitimate grants. They actually say, hey, it's going to take you some money to actually do the thing and spend the money where we require you to spend it. And so they are supporting those administration costs and the resources needed. So,
One date that's not on here is Amanda's fellowship is over in July.
yes.
So that is also part of us going, okay, we have somebody with knowledge, skills, and abilities. By the time we apply for these funds over the next couple of months, that at least gets the fund part going while we, if we do go forward to this, find staff who would also help to administer this and things like that. So,
Good job, Plug.
yeah. I'd like to say it works out that way, but.
All right. So, infill housing timeline, really just wanted to hammer home in the next slide that the application deadlines are really quickly approaching, and based off of the pre-work that is necessary, that's again why we're here now. Okay, so this is the nuts and bolts. This next slide is the nuts and bolts of really what is it going to take for us to be able to actually administer this. If we assume that the total infill program duration, so is 5 years for us to do the work and complete the program. Estimated neighborhood impact, the average of the average, let's say we can get to 120 homes. That's about 30% of the estimated eligible. That is a large enough impact in order to then kind of cascade into private investment as well. So that's kind of like, that's a really good target, is 120 homes.
So Amanda, really quick, when we talk about neighborhood stabilization, maybe we should kind of hit on this. And we talk about private reinvestment. Part of the thing that you're doing is you're seeding investment in these homes, right? Because one of the challenges is you buy a home in one of these neighborhoods for, let's say, $30,000, $40,000. I'm gonna bet you a steak lunch. It's gonna take you $60,000 to $70,000. You can't do it for much less than $100,000 total, maybe a little more. I'm looking at the Chodo, who's tried this a couple different times and done it very well. But this is not a quick flip money-making ordeal. And what happens is if you don't have some cash up front in these types of programs, right now, before we do something like this, you're gonna go to the bank and say, hey, I've got this great property, great neighborhood, I'd like to put $60,000 into it. And the bank's gonna say, okay. And then they're gonna look at all the comps around you, and they're coming in at $40,000 and $50,000 and $60,000. And the bank says, I'm not giving you $100,000. And that's the problem. So we can't get investment in these neighborhoods. So we seed this smaller area with this reinvestment. We start to bring up property values. So when the bank looks around and somebody starts to make that private investment, they now have properties that are at 80, 90, and 100,000, 110,000 around them that we can start kind of churning that over in a natural way. And the stability is that the neighborhood keeps those values. And lets that continue, not just these 120 homes that are possible. You would have additional investment after that. So that's kind of the whole long-term game plan with these types of programs.
Yep. So the next bullet is that each application, if we assume that, their application comes in, we have the get quotes period, we have the get the work done period, and then we have the closeout period. That can be anywhere from 1 to 3 years per property. And so if we assume a caseload where they're doing the various different things of case management, making sure that the homeowner understands the various different bids, what needs to be done, and kind of doing a lot of that guiding and helping along the side. We are estimating that one full-time person could manage about 49 cases per year.
But that is their full-time job. That is what they do. So we may have other positions that could possibly take, 10 or 15 a year, but we're going to have somebody dedicated to doing this. And when we talk about resource intensive, this is resource intensive. It's a lot like what we actually already do for a lot of other things. If you think about grants where we do financial qualifying, submitting bids, we've done that in the past. Reviewing somebody's application, giving them feedback on the application, having that turned in, getting all the paperwork finalized, having them report out, all those things that are kind of part of that administration process. We do, and we've used averages from other programs we run. So when we've run small business loans during COVID, when we do cases for fair housing, some of that is just that information taking in, that verifying, investigating. The time duration and intensity is very similar. Something else to keep in mind when we say a 5-year program, all 120 people are not, or eligible people are not showing up on day one. So they're going to kind of trickle in. There may not be people who are applying till year 2 or 3. There will have to be a cutoff point, but it will happen over time. And some of these are just going to be more complicated than others. And the reality is, having done some of these programs before, the majority of people, especially the homeowners, not the landlords, but the homeowners, are going to need help. They are not used to pulling all these types of paperwork together. They don't know contractors to get the bids from. We do a lot of hand-holding on this type of work, of explaining, oh, well, here's how you'd get the bids. No, you need to turn all 3 of them into us. I'm not trying to be difficult, but it's just the reality of these types of programs. You have to have a lot of patience, and it takes people time to make these things effective. Now, if we go back to why we're doing this, there are very long-term benefits, though, to these types of programs. Stabilizing these houses don't stabilize just that home, it stabilizes the whole neighborhood. So yes, human intensive up front, time intensive and resource intensive, but long, big term payoff. So we believe administratively and staff-wise we could do this, and the admin dollars that are available could help offset that cost. It's possible we can make a full-time employee out of this, but I think we could also look at temp or a contract employee. That would definitely be something we would research more. But I guess the question I expected you guys to ask us today is, well, Lauren, this all sounds really great, but Amanda leaves in July. Who's going to do this? Yeah. And so part of this is there is some money to get help to do this. But if we're interested in doing infill, it's not the kind of program that we can run without a commitment. And there are very few entities out there who could do what we could do because we have the technology, the staff expertise to do some of these things. And as local government, we have the ability to apply for funds others aren't able to. And from a marketing perspective, people already come to us, even when it's not our program. So if we can help facilitate that for some of the programs that are out there to get those monies used, in addition to these monies we can bring to the table, that's kind of that best bang for your buck part of all of this. So a typical full-time employee is about $100,000 a year by the time we take vacation and health benefits and all of those things. So we put that number in there just to kind of show you if it was an FTE, that's what it runs us. But I also think we could look at things like a contract employee, or there are even some firms out there that we could contract some of this out to. That's details we have to get into, but there's money available and we could figure that out for sure. And I think another good spot that is logical for people is our Community Relations Division, which is in Community and Development Services. People are already going there for housing issues. We have built relationships with a lot of the community members in this identified neighborhood. We have a good relationship with the food bank, which is also in that targeted neighborhood. So we think community relations would be a good spot, and their staff has a lot of these skills to administer a program like this. In fact, they also administer the ESG, the Emergency Solutions Grant, and work with a lot of entities dealing with infill housing, like Salina Grace and some of the others. So.
All right. So implementation timeline. This next one is just to lay it all out on an actual timeline. And all of these dots are quarters. So starting with today, we have the infill study session. And then each quarter, there's something new to do. So next quarter, we start out with the HUD Healthy Homes and the CBDG grants or applications are due. Then the Federal Home Loan Bank Affordable Housing Program application is due. I happen to also leave that quarter. That's what fellow Lead for America contract ends is. Then quarter 4, and so on, all the way to the Live Salina infill renovation program has recommended to be started. And finally, last but not least, commission response requested. Is commission direction given to move forward with the program and implementation as described? Questions?
And of course, any questions?
Yes, questions. Commissioner Davis.
Are you committed to a job or an academic pursuit come August 1st?
I am committed to an academic pursuit. I intend to be finishing my dissertation for my PhD program.
But you could do that part-time.
Good, it's true.
We've talked to Amanda about certain things, but she also has plans,
Right.
so.
I think this is great. I don't know whether we could have come up with, well, I know we couldn't have come up with this, but I just want to get out of your way and say go for it.
So Amanda has plans, but you're anchored here, right?
Correct. I'll be in Salina for the long term.
So is this part of your PhD?
Surprisingly, it's not.
It's a long story about how
a long
Amanda
story.
got to us, but it's worked out really, really well. And to Commissioner Davis's point, it has been invaluable to have Amanda here because it takes time to pull all this together and to look at all the I's that need to be dotted and T's that need to be crossed when it comes to these types of programs, and to have somebody put in the thoughtful time to be able to get to this has been important. So we're very grateful.
So to make this happen, depends on the grant funding.
Correct.
And along with that grants come admin fees, administrative fees that would cover
Correct.
the people that is going to be required to get it done.
So that's the cash inflow. The outflow is local match. Do you have any quantification of local match?
I want to say in total, if we get everything, that the local match is just north of 300,000.
So we wouldn't spend all million
Right.
at this point. Now, the other thing I think is worth noting is CDBG and Federal Home Loan Bank are not going anywhere. You know, some of these pots are a little bit bigger money because of ARPA funds and things like that. But if we have a good go at this and we find it to be successful, we can apply again. So that's where, and then some of these can be loans and they can be grants. So loans get paid back, right? So if people are paying money back into the system, and some of that's in getting into those details. But if we are collecting revenue or basically recapturing the interest rate on that, we could also put that back into feature applications as well. So if we get good at this, and there are some, where did CDBG say that Federal Home Loan Bank has got somebody who's been turning these over, I think, like solid for the last 5 years.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's and this is, Federal Home Loan Bank wants to do this. I mean, we would have to find a bank in town that is a member who needs to do their community reinvestment dollars and is part of Federal Home Loan Bank. But identifying that partnership, this helps them meet some of their requirements and allows us to do the program. So this doesn't have to be this one neighborhood. If we're successful at this, and this is something the commission says, yeah, this is making the right level of impact, we could keep doing it. I think the other thing that's important about the HIAC, and why I'm just kind of relieved that we did it at first, it was like, why do we need to do this? We know everybody knows our stuff. We've been talking about housing for 2 years, but when we sat down with these entities that are basically handing, almost everybody we've talked about was on that HIAC council.
Yes.
And we really kind of had to pre-plan this in front of them to say, is this something you would want from us? We basically got a yes. You're not official because you still have to apply, but you guys are doing the things that we would give money to. And the way that you're approaching this and how you've approached it is a good methodology. Because they know that we're applying for all these programs together. They don't want us to apply, get awarded, then not get another one. So the idea is, yes, get this council together, review kind of this report that we put together to make sure we're on the right track. So I'm really hopeful too that yes, we're applying for multiples and one goes down, it might have a bit of a domino effect, but they're really kind of meant to be applied for that way. And the state approach of using that HIAC council to even review us before we even apply shows that's the right methodology.
And I guess I would add that, we've had conversations over the years about what outcome we'd like or what our brainstorming thoughts are about an approach, but we've been successful on the new housing side by saying we need to inventory the tools that are available to us and figure out how to use them. We've been successful because we had a lot of the groundwork laid, whether it's housing or whether it was the master plan for the river or other things, that we go in positioned pretty well to be competitive. And I have to commend Lauren and Amanda that they've gone out and looked at peer communities, have looked at programs and inventoried the tools that are out there and tried to package them the best they could. It may not be where we thought we were headed, but it is strategically trying to take advantage of what's out there.
One thing I do like about this is that it looks like the goal is to keep people in their houses.
Yes.
So we're not displacing people.
Correct.
And I thought I heard you mention a little bit about something, but is education on maintaining, once you fix the property up, it's great, but you have to maintain it so you're not back there 2 years later
Yes.
re-repairing. Is that education and sort of homeowner mentoring an official part of what we'd be doing?
I
Or can it
would
be?
personally really like it to be a requirement. The grants say that we need to allow for financial counseling to be available. So if somebody's on a fixed income and they really have no way to do anything differently, requiring financial counseling kind of probably gets really annoying.
And not just financial, but
How to fix
this is
the
the
toilet.
this is the pipe bleeding
Yeah.
from your sump
Gotcha.
pump. Don't block it.
Yeah.
The paint's peeling. This is the time to fix it. Don't wait
I
until
love
it's
that
all the
idea.
way.
I think that is definitely a long-term goal. I know we've had conversations with the Community Housing Development Organization, or CHODO. We have seen this done really well at Habitat in Topeka. Yeah. Their Habitat Restore has an entire teaching classroom. It's so cool. I'm not gonna lie, it's so cool. So all their walls are covered in plexiglass, so you can see into them. So they teach like wiring classes. They have a toilet on wheels so that they can move it around and teach you how to change your own toilet. They have the pipes showing in the wall so they can point that out. And as part of their Habitat program, when you either go through, because they also offer reno and new construction the more traditional way. So if you go through either of those programs, the Habitat for Humanity of Topeka, you have to take their new applicant class. And they use this classroom to like wall by wall walk you through it. But they also teach some of the cool things too, like how to pour a concrete countertop, how to retile a backsplash. But to Commissioner Davis's point, just kind of that home education. I think it's just kind of finding the right nonprofit in the community who could help with that. and what those dollars look like in the future, but that is definitely, Habitat Topeka told us they've had a huge impact from that, and it's been very successful for them. They also have their restore, so as people are demoing and taking things out, they've got a vanity. It's just not going to work, but it's a perfectly good working vanity. They bring them in there, light fixtures, all kinds of things. They teach classes that aren't required, like how to rewire a lighting fixture using some of their spare parts, all kinds of different things. So it's pretty cool.
Sure, the fire department is excited.
That does sound like a good program, but I think to Commissioner Davis's comment, teaching people just to take care of what they have
Absolutely.
and not let it get run down is important.
Yeah.
Lauren, can you tell me what HAT and HIAC stands for, please?
Well, I'll let Amanda tell you.
Yes. HAT is the Housing Assessment Tool. And HIAC is Housing Incentive Action Committee?
Yeah, it's action.
For sure.
Yeah, it's a lot of acronyms in this PowerPoint
Write
today.
that one down.
Yeah, it's Housing Incentive
Action
Committee.
Yes.
Ah.
Let's go with it.
So, and it's basically comprised of folks from Commerce, Kansas Housing Resource Corporation, and other partners that are in this housing funding world. And the goal is to make sure that you're really prepared to use these dollars before you apply. So you can't even submit your application until you've gone through their pre-process, basically pre-qualification. So we have done that part.
This whole thing, as we just went through it, the first time we've seen it today, seems really daunting to me, and labor intensive. So there has to be an inventory and stuff done, and that would start immediately, the way I understand it. And I'm looking here, and it talks about, hiring and training staff in January of '24. Is that when we would bring new staff on?
That would be my goal. That would give us time for, essentially getting them up to speed, getting the marketing out there. I mean, basically setting up so that you're taking applications either by the beginning of 2025 or sooner.
So it says 2 of 24 to start the HUD HH, which I can't quite read all mine because the screen's over. So that's the healthy home. So is that something we would do prior to the January 25 renovation program starting? Or I'm a little confused by the 224 HUD HH and then 324 start AHP.
Yeah, I can take that one.
Okay.
So part of those are going to be with partnerships with our partners for those specific grants. So the HUD Healthy Homes, KDHE is going to need to be involved, and there's some sort of pre-qualification and health counseling that need to happen prior to the home actually starting a renovation. And so those sorts of preparations and establishing those programs need to start at
So
that
that's
point.
just starting the program. That's not.
Correct. That's not
so
starting doling out the
Those funds
money.
are not being dispersed. Those funds would be dispersed
Correct.
in January of 2025, or
Yes.
whenever you start the entire program.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
That was a little confusing to me
Sorry.
when I was looking at the table.
And I agree with the dauntingness, but I think what staff looked at is we have run small programs before, $5,000, $10,000. It takes as much to run somebody through this stuff for $5,000 as it does for $100,000. The paperwork's all the same. So my thought is, if we're gonna do it, let's do it for an amount of money that actually makes the impact. And these monies are out there. One of the hard things is people being able to get access to it. If we can distill that down into one application, have these built relationships to be able to bring a more actionable amount of money to these individuals, that's really where we go from what we've done in the past to the success we see in the future.
Yeah, and I agree with that, and I like that. I just, want to make sure we have the staffing to make sure we get from today to the actual infill and the dollars being spent as we see them today. So
And between admin funds from the grants and city budget funds. That's a conversation we're going to need to have. We're trying to get this conversation before you before strategic planning because it's a competing priority among other things.
Because we're going to have staffing, we're going to have upfront costs in order to implement this.
Correct.
So,
Yeah,
and I don't mind spending the money as long as I know we get to a place where I know we're being successful with the program. So it's all about having the right people in the right place.
well, and Mayor, we can definitely dig into those numbers more, specifically for strategic planning, so you have some of those in front of you. But I think, as Mayor Scragg, or City Manager Scragg said, I just need to make sure that this is, before we put in a bunch more time, if this is the direction you guys are looking for to get to really what you adopted in the Live Salina plan.
And I guess you've looked at other communities, and because did I see in here that once you start on a house, did I see a 1 to 3 year or?
Yeah, we went with a 1 to 3 year window per application. Some may go really quick. Others may be slower. You know, some of the grants require that you actually help participate in the rehab of the home. If somebody's gonna kind of take a more traditional approach and they're gonna DIY what they can, okay, so it's gonna take them a little bit longer. Or we have some houses I'm imagining who are gonna have some unique projects, some masonry work, tuck point and stuff like that. Finding those people is hard. And so you may have an application that's going to take 12 months for somebody to get in there to do some of that certain work.
This can be both inside and outside.
Yes.
And will be both inside and outside,
Correct.
depending on the, so.
It's also not limited to just kind of the traditional structural things. The idea is the houses have to be brought up to date.
Right.
They may need new countertops. They may need new cabinets. That's part of
Well, I've
bringing
always
the
said,
homes
as you
up.
drive through neighborhoods, you can tell that certain homes, just to bring them up to standard, they need siding, windows,
Yep.
roofs, porches. I mean, just some of the basics too. And I guess we've had other communities have done this. So you've found communities where the individuals are willing to do that, as far as go through the time and the necessary to do it. That's
Yes. Most of the grants require that you've got to get to the core essentials of the home. HVAC's up to date, wiring's up to date, roof is sound. Basically, the house has got to be watertight, up to a certain energy level, and have a solid foundation. And then we go from there.
So they covered it in detail in terms of the different mapping and trying to triangulate on a location, but I don't think I'm telling you anything that you don't realize. But at some point, and we rolled this out, we've got that target neighborhood, and that's going to be a tough conversation for people that may want to participate in the program and they're not in the target neighborhood. But that's the advice we've received, and
It's the requirement.
intentional.
It's
The
not even,
requirement to
I mean, it's
have
the
a-
requirement. We have got to pick a targeted neighborhood.
neighborhood.
If we don't, the majority of this money is not accessible.
And if it works well, then we can, expand. But we do have to start somewhere, and preferably with neighborhoods that are salvageable.
Correct.
Where the only option is otherwise to knock them down.
Were there any close seconds to this track? I assume this is a short list of one, but you must have looked at other geographic areas. Was there anything that approximated this?
They're all in kind of the same relative neighborhood. The thing that was intriguing that's really not data specific, but it's actionable around that Broadway corridor area is the food bank has been doing a ton of work. And they've got the Healthy Pathways grant that's going in there to keep that and enhance that. We've got sidewalks that are being already improved for connectivity in there. Public Works has analyzed. Broadway corridor has seen improvements. We've got new activity going there. So it was like of an area that we could pick that kind of had
Movement.
Yeah, I mean, the idea is it doesn't want to be so far gone that bringing it back is going to be very difficult. You want something that's kind of already in the move, and we're just kind of seeding that to further see that healthy rehabilitation and stabilization. So that's one of the reasons we picked that particular block area.
What I like about this philosophy is that hopefully it will have a effect. They see this house getting fixed up nice, and someone over here has the funds. Well, why don't we do that?
I
And then it
promise
kinda-
you'll see it. It's amazing. Even the
Right.
Chodo's seen that in their houses when
Yeah.
they renovate. It's amazing. It's the coolest part of it.
Right. And my question is, the labor shortage is not going to get any better between now and then. Could nonprofit and service organizations, this gets approved and funded, could they come in and do the work?
As long as they are licensed within the city of Salina to do the work they are offering to do.
They'd have to be licensed contractors?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
Per the
and we have
grants.
a licensing process, so they would have to be licensed and able to meet those
But
qualifications.
if they had one guy in the group that was licensed, they'd be good to go.
And
Details.
and the appropriate insurance and all the things. Yes.
I'm not ready to sign off on that, but the idea is there, and yes, there's possibilities. How about that?
I know that there is groups out there looking for projects to do.
And there is a category of craftsman work. You might be thinking mechanical, electrical, plumbing, but when you think about paint and touch-up and just kind of barn raising, you get a lot of people in and get a lot accomplished in a short amount of time. There's probably some opportunity
Yeah,
there.
kind of like what Ambux does with the ramps.
Well, and the Chodo does that with demo and cleanup on several of its houses. Volunteer groups can come in and help clean up those yards, get materials and stuff out. Those things are all very doable, and you do not need a license for those typically.
That actually segues into the question I have. You mentioned the DIY component to this. I'm sure there's a standard that has to be maintained, and there's a checks and balances for that.
Yes, so you will still need to pull your permit. So, we have different regulations for owner occupied. You're going to do the work yourself. There's that component, but that doesn't stop you from having to pull your permit and then getting that work inspected. So all work would have to be approved and inspected by City of Salina.
Is there an ownership requirement as far as length of ownership prior to applying?
No, we hadn't thought of that. That's an interesting one.
I guess where I was going with that is, in theory, if there weren't enough applicants, maybe local realtors could maybe encourage people to go into that area and take advantage of that opportunity and kind of get the ball rolling, if you will.
We haven't seen that as a restriction. If,
The
so,
AMI
yeah, so it's not
would still have
there.
to be met. The
AMI.
80% of AMI would still need to be met, so that might make it a little
Understood.
difficult, but possible.
I'm just incredibly enthusiastic about the prospect of this. I mean, I personally think the architecture in that area, there's a lot of streets in particular extremely interesting to look at. And just my knowledge of redoing properties, a lot of the intricacies of the trim and the exterior, they're not cheap, and you need a six-figure amount to throw at it to really get something done. And this just seems like a great step forward.
I just think of all the foundations. Like every
And that's a good
Chodo
point.
house we've looked at, it's like, oh, we gotta fix the foundation. So at least foundations can get fixed, and from there, it gets better.
And can a lot of those foundations be fixed while the individuals are still living in the home? If they're not too far gone, then they're just straightening walls.
Yeah, if they're not too far gone, they're safe. And that's the bonus also of having us do it versus somebody else, is we actually have compliance people who are qualified, inspectors who can go out and check those things and verify that.
Well, and we can assist someone that might be otherwise overwhelmed in terms of figuring out the solution.
Right.
Yeah, but if the question is, if you're a nonprofit trying to run these programs going, well, I don't know if the house is stable, well, we have people who can do that and verify that. So that's also part of this.
So I guess what you're looking for from us today is just approval to move forward. And
Yeah, I don't know that you need formal approval. If this meets your expectations, we'll be back at strategic planning with some of the planning elements, and we'll head down the path of trying to make application and get ready to try to secure some of these. Or maybe I should say all of these.
this is kind of like America's Got Talent, yes or no?
Definitely, yes.
Approval.
Go for it.
You got 5 yeses, I give you go.
Go to
on the next
Hollywood.
page. There you go.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Okay, it is 4 o'clock, and I will call the March 20th, 2023 Salina City Commission meeting to order. I would first ask staff for confirmation that the Kansas Open Meeting Act required notice has been properly provided.
Yes.
Thank you. Could we have roll call?
Mayor Hoppick,
Here?
Commissioner Davis,
Here?
Commissioner Lankowitz,
Here.
Commissioner Longbine,
Here.
Commissioner Ryan.
Aye.
As we prepare for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence, I would ask that we keep the family and co-workers of John Gertzen in our thoughts and prayers. He was a member of the Salina Fire Department, was a battalion chief, and passed away on March 16th. So we, again, want the family and fellow firefighters to know that you are in our thoughts and prayers as we move forward. So with that, would those that are able, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. With that, we will move to awards and proclamations.
Item 3.1, recognition of the day of March 19th, 2023 as Major Dennis Pugh Remembrance Day in the city of Salina. Jason McIntyre, commander of the Sons of American Legion, will read the proclamation.
Major Dennis Pugh Remembrance Day. Whereas Major Dennis Gerard Pugh was born February 10th, 1944 in Hutchinson, Kansas. He attended grade school at New Cambria, Kansas, and graduated from Salina Central School in 1962. He attended Boys State in Wichita and went on to the University of Kansas for 1 year before being appointed to the United States Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs. Whereas Major Pugh graduated from the Academy in 1967 and attended UCLA, where he completed his master's degree in qualitative analysis mathematical methods from UCLA. Pugh went to Mather Air Force Base in Sacramento, where he took navigator's training. He attended combat crew training and survival schools before he went overseas. Whereas on September 15, 1969, Major Pugh was sent to Ubon, Thailand to fly the F-4, something he had always dreamed of doing. While flying his weapons systems officer on a forward air controller mission on March 19, 1970 with Captain Richard A. Rash, Major Pugh aboard a F-4D on a combat mission over Ho Chi Minh Trail in the Kybon province, Laos, received hostile ground fire and ejected from the aircraft in an area approximately 15 kilometers south of Mugia Pass. He and his pilot ejected safely from the aircraft. Rash was injured, but Pugh was in good shape. Whereas airborne search and rescue forces established contact with both of them on the ground, but were unable to recover them due to darkness. The next day, SAR forces re-established contact with Pugh, who reported that hostile forces were within 10 meters of his position. He requested the SAR forces place ordnance on his position and then held down the transmit key on his radio. Then excited Asian voices were heard, followed by 15 to 20 shots being fired, followed by silence. Ordnance was placed on his position as he requested, and there was no further contact from him. Whereas Rouse was rescued on March 21st and reported hearing the sound of small arms fire from Pugh's location, after which he lost radio contact with him. Further efforts to locate Pugh were unsuccessful, and he was declared missing in action. Returning U.S. POWs had no information on the eventual fate of Pugh. He was later declared killed in action, body not recovered, based on a presumptive finding of death. Whereas on March 19, 2023, and throughout the year, let us honor and remember Major Pugh and other Americans missing in action, as well as those who have borne the indignities of captivity in service to our country. Let us remember the brave servicemen and women who died as prisoners in foreign lands during our nation's past struggles, and recognize those at home who anxiously awaited their loved ones to return. They are an inspiration to all Americans, and we will always remember their sacrifices.
Thank you. And actually, every day should be a day that we remember and are thankful for those that have fought to keep this country free. I would ask what the Sons of the American Legion are doing to help recognize the MIAs and POWs that we're aware of.
Well, currently, with coordination with the Veterans Association in Sunset Park, we took it a little section, and we're doing the POW MIA monument. The granite should be here next month, and it should be in place by Memorial Day.
Great. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us?
There were 10 POWs from Salina, Saline County that will also be honored in that monument.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
I think Major Pugh's brother is online if he wants to say something.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you very much. I am Dennis Pugh's little brother, former major in the United States Marine Corps, who has obviously dedicated my life to his as a role model, having attended the United States Naval Academy and going into the Marine Corps. I'm extremely proud that you all would have this proclamation today, and I'm very much looking forward to Memorial Day, when we will dedicate the MIA POW memorial that Mr. McIntyre has mentioned. I especially want to thank the VFW and the American Legion and Jason McIntyre personally for all that you're doing to honor my brother and to honor all those who have been missing in action in POW from Saline County and served in the military. Thank you very, very much.
And thank you for sharing with us.
Mayor and Commissioners, you may recall last Monday we authorized application for POW MIA city status with the Jefferson Barracks POW MIA Museum, and the application deadline was the following day, so we weren't sure whether it would get in soon enough and whether it would get processed. But over the weekend, we were notified that we have been designated as a POW MIA city through Jefferson Barracks POW MIA Museum. So that process was expedited apparently, and we received notice.
Jason, if you'll come here, I have a proclamation for you. Okay, we have no public hearings or items scheduled for a certain time, so that will move us to item 5, consent agenda.
Item 5.1, approve the minutes of March 13th, 2023. And item 5.2, award the bid for project number 23013, 2023 chip seal to APAC Kansas Inc., Shears Division of Emporia, in the amount of $278,891.53 with a 5% construction contingency for a total project authorization not to exceed $292,836.11, and authorizing the city manager to execute a contract with APAC Kansas Inc., Shears Division of Emporia, upon fulfillment of all prerequisites under the bid documents.
Thank you. Is there an item a commissioner would like to have removed? If not, I would accept a motion for approval.
Mayor, I move approval of the consent agenda.
We have a motion and a second to approve consent agenda items 5.1 and 5.2. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? That passes 5-0. That will bring us to administration.
Item 6.1, approve ordinance number 23-11146 on second reading, changing the zoning district classification of the west half of the property located at 509 East Elm Street from I-2 light industrial to C1 restricted business, to unify the zoning of the CKF campus and to allow addiction treatment housing on property CKF is acquiring from St. Francis Community Services, Inc.
Thank you. Ordinance number 23-11146 was passed on first reading on March 13th. Since that time, no comments have been received. Do we have any questions or comments from the commission?
One question, I've been asked by a few people if this action in any way changes the historical designation of the building as far as former Dunbar School, and is the second part of that, does that historical designation change the way any modifications to the building would be approved?
Mr. Andrew?
The modification question, there are certain, in the historic landmark designation, there were certain features primarily on the front facades of the building that were protected from modification without review by the Heritage Commission, and that will remain unchanged regardless of the ownership or regardless of the zoning. The landmark status remains in place regardless of who owns the building.
Okay, thank you.
Good question. Okay. Any comments from the public? Okay, with that, I will bring it back to the commission for action.
Mayor, I move we approve ordinance number 23-11146 on second reading.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second to approve ordinance number 23-11146 on second reading. We will do a roll call, please.
Commissioner Davis,
Aye.
Commissioner Lankowitz,
Aye.
Commissioner Longbine,
Aye.
Commissioner Ryan,
Aye.
Mayor Hoppick.
Aye. That ordinance passes 5-0. That will bring us to 6.2.
Item 6.2, award the bid for project number 21025, Centennial Road Improvements, Water Well to Arnold, for $2,188,388.51 with a 5% construction contingency for a total project authorization not to exceed $2,297,808.51, and authorizing the city manager to execute a contract with TRR Inc., doing business as T&R Construction of Salina, upon fulfillment of all prerequisites under the bid documents.
Mr. Stack.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. This is a project that's been kind of in the works since the Schwan's expansion started a few years ago, and we were able to get some KDOT money for economic development money from the Kansas Department of Transportation to help with the project. We've been able to get a partnership with Saline County to pay for our share and to split our shares up of this project. So yeah, we've had agreements with KDOT and a agreement with Lochner to design it, and agreement with Bradley's to give us the right-of-way for the project. And trying to think of anything else we've done. I guess that's the main part. So this is really, thank you, Jacob. I'd always like to talk with my pointer and my map, so it helps me to kind of understand where things are at. This is a project here to the north. Here's Schwan's. The new big pond and borrow pit area is right there. Schilling subdivision's over here. So yeah, we're finally starting to get this last section of Centennial, about a half mile here, down to Waterwell Road. Vortex is here. The Superior Plumbing, yeah, they were just here last week. So yeah, the Superior Plumbing's building is in there. So it's kind of helps the Salina Airport industrial area as well as all these businesses that are there. It's an old, just an old chip seal road. It's not gravel, it's asphalt road, but it's an old ditch section. It's county road, so it's nice to get an upgrade. And we did get some really good bids on this project. And we'll see continued growth and expansion probably in this area. Truck routes for Schwan's for sure, and of course with Vortex and Superior in that area, and Geoprobe out there as well. So it's a good area for an improvement. The county owned half the road before. We were able to annex it recently, and then got the right of way for it. So it's all ours now, and they're giving us the $200,000 for our match here. And then our bids came in well at our $2.1 to $2.2 million. So we're pretty excited about that. Let's see, anything else to really say about it? I guess the details of the project, it matches the Centennial Road to the north, hike and bike trail on the east side, 10-foot sidewalk basically. We'll have regular sidewalk on the west side, trying to connect some of those businesses in just that area to the hike and bike trail. It's not, of course, a real big sidewalk area. You don't see any sidewalks out there at all. So we're trying to get connections to the trail. Definitely have new concrete pavement, bike lanes on the road. So we have those out there now on Centennial to the north, and we'll have them all the way to Waterwell here. We'll put a turn lane on Waterwell for the trucks and just traffic that turns onto Centennial. A lot of interstate traffic coming over, or a lot of interstate routes for the truck traffic will take right turns there, so we wanted to improve that. This is an impact street for our comprehensive plan, so it kind of just means you try to dress it up the best you can in the area, whether you have a sign or pedestrian amenities or landscaping. So we've kind of incorporated all of that into this in some fashion where we could. There's a pretty large ditch on the west side, so a lot of drainage actually ends up in this area. So there wasn't a lot of room to put a lot of amenities, but we've got some. We've definitely got a pedestrian bench and a crosswalk and some trees to try to dress up the corridor, and then a wayfinding sign. So the wayfinding sign is definitely helpful because it's an area that we're in town, and there's a lot in that area to direct traffic to. So that's really where we handled our aesthetic requirements from our comprehensive plan. So yeah, we bid the project about a month ago. TNR Construction was the low bid, very competitive bids with Smoky Hill and Votes Parga and another contractor out of Junction City, so we felt really good about the bids. And then our engineer's estimate was quite a bit higher. So we've seen high estimates on the KDOT bids around the state, but so far Salina has been, we've gotten good bids. That's all I can say. We'll keep it going. TNR's really been aggressive and ambitious at the work. Definitely a great local contractor working for us a lot in a lot of areas. You'll hear about them again today in another project. But this one be really their first large project for us. So they've definitely grown over the years, done a lot of good work for us, done a lot of subdivisions, a lot of grading and dirt work in the city. But yeah, this will be really their first arterial widening project, and we're excited about it because yeah, they've got a paver now, they've got good crews, they've got good stormwater crews. So anyway, we're excited to have them. It's always a bummer for the other guys who didn't win, but it's a good project for us and a good bid. So I will, guess we're just recommending approval of this, and we've got our matching funds there from the city, as well as some matching funds from the county that should pretty well cover it. We might be over with our contingency by a little bit, but we're close to our original $2.5 million number, which is unbelievable at this point. So I will say thank you and stand for questions.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Stack?
Will traffic will the road remain open to traffic?
That's a good question. I should have said that. We are not planning that. Scanlon, right over here, as you can see, is kind of a quarter mile to the west, and that will be the detour route for everyone. So their Schwan's is kind of planning on that. We've been talking with them for quite a while. And Scanlon's not in the best shape, but our plan is to make sure we fix it and keep it in good enough shape to make it.
They'll be ripping out everything and regrading, starting from scratch?
Yep, pretty much. Yeah, that's really, the road actually shifts to the east quite a bit because of the drainage. So kind of where the road was, we're going to use that as a part of the road, but then it widens, what is that, 10, almost 20 feet to the east. So it's just, they're hauling out, putting in a whole new road. So yeah, it'll be demolished.
What's the time frame to complete the project, do you know?
Well, we have till next spring was our deadline. Right, we were afraid with a lot of the bidders that we had to delay this a few weeks just talking with bidders, but a lot of bidders are pretty busy this year. So that's not hard, or not surprising to hear, not uncommon, but they said, if you can give us till spring of next year, we think we can bid on this. So we said, all right, seems like that could be a possibility. We did put in the plans that, or the specifications that, once you start, don't just go out there and close it, in a few weeks and then don't work on it till fall. That's not going to work very well for anybody out there. So that's part of our contract was, okay, whenever you do start, then you've got till next, basically June to get it done.
So there's not a deadline on when the dollars have to be spent from KDOT?
No, not from KDOT, okay. No. Our agreement's somewhat,
because I think
wide open.
We started discussing this, back in July of 21, knowing that this project was coming, if I remember right. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, it seems like the Project Rise, Schwan's project actually originally got us the money
Yeah.
early that year. So yeah, it was.
And it was kind of in two segments. We
Right.
got the north section and then Centennial ditch through EDA, and then these funds through KDOT.
Right. So yeah, we don't have a deadline to spend it, and our thinking is they'll start in the fall of this year and end it next spring. That's kind of what we've heard from them.
So it should coincide with the completion of the distribution center.
That'd be nice. I would hope so, but it seems like they've said that thing's on track for faster than that, I thought, but I guess we'll see. The big freezer project, I think, will be about that time, but I was thinking they're trying to open their stuff this year for their distribution area. So we've been talking with them quite a bit. So I guess they're aware of the truck rerouting, and understandably so, they'll deal with it for a while.
To me, it's a great way for us to leverage 200,000 when you get 200 from
Yeah.
the county and that much from the state. It's a great way to leverage those dollars. So it's a good project and a needed one, I believe, for what's going on out there with the additional truck traffic and stuff that's going to be coming in. So, okay, any comments or questions from the public? If not, I'll bring it back to the commission for action.
Mayor Hoppick, I move that this commission award the bid for project number 21025 Centennial Road, Water Well 2 Arnold, to TNR Construction for $2,188,388.51 with a $109,420 5% construction contingency for a total project authorization not to exceed $2,297,808.51, and authorizing the city manager to execute a contract with TRR Incorporated, doing business as TNR Construction of Salina, upon fulfillment of all prerequisites under the bid documents.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion, a second, and I'm going to shorten this a little bit. A motion to award the bid for project number 21025 Centennial Road from Waterwell to Arnold with TNR Construction for a total amount including construction contingency of $2,297,808.51 and authorizing the city manager to execute a contract with TRR Inc. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That passes 5-0. That will bring us to item number 6.3.
Item 6.3, approve resolution 23-8114, declaring the eligibility of the city to submit an implementation grant application to the Pathways to a Healthy Kansas, a Blue Cross Blue Shield of Kansas grant program, in partnership with Live Well Saline County, and authorizing the city manager to submit the application.
Mr. Stack, you're back up.
Back again. Okay, thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. This is it was interesting listening to the study session, going, I don't know if I didn't really plan this, but it's a good project for the area there we're talking about at the study session. So we're excited that this is a grant opportunity that was presented to us a few years ago from the Live Well Saline County group, and they submitted a grant to the Blue Cross Blue Shield of Kansas for the Pathways, and Pathways is, I'm trying to define that in here, exactly what that is. There's a lot of things the Pathways Blue Cross Blue Shield grant program funds, but since we're a partner in that, we were able to possibly use some of the money that they were eligible to get for, connection project or a health safe routes to foods or safe routes to multimodal transportation, basically. Placemaking, some of those were the things that we were working with them on, and then as the group and as the surveys and as the coordination occurred over time, most of the group, or the group kind of narrowed in on the food bank at the intersection of Chicago and Spruce, right north of the, thank you, Jacob, just right north of the Ace Hardware here. And as that, as a lot of the coordination occurred, there's just a lot of things as a part of this program, but the food bank actually submitted for a placemaking grant, And so as a part of acknowledging that, that really is a key player in that area of town, there are really no sidewalks, very few sidewalks around there. You'll see if you go over there, of course, the church, I don't know the name of the church there, but Pastor Smith's church there is a major community player as well. There's a lot of foot traffic in that area, a lot of people that come to the food bank, a lot of good that area does for our community, and it's fairly disconnected when it comes to anything but a car. So you see a lot of people walking, you see a lot of people, there's definitely a worn path. There are bus stops in the area, but not right there, but there's one here, one over here, then one over here. There are a few sidewalks in this area. So if we can connect a sidewalk from Broadway, which gets us to the Broadway corridor, over along Walnut, down Chicago, and then also connect over to Clark here along Spruce, we can connect to one here on South Street, which gets you to a neighborhood as well. So it just feels like this project really connects a part of town that is doing good for the community. Safe routes to food kind of covers that, but I think we're actually the multimodal recreational trail transportation infrastructure, whatever leg of that we were. But we got the opportunity to submit to the Blue Cross Blue Shield of Kansas an opportunity for funding for the sidewalk project. So as we worked with the group, this is what we came up with. And the cost is $125,000 with a $94,000 ask, 25% city share. So we're at $31,000. So it's leveraging our dollars pretty nicely for putting in a sidewalk in an area that could use a sidewalk. We do have our sidewalk gap funding, or sidewalk gap matrix, I guess. I attached that here. I just kind of talked about the options that are the points that we have from this in this area. So it definitely meets quite a bit of the criteria for our sidewalk matrix. Scores out kind of middle of the road. We have a lot of sidewalks in town that would score well, but this one meets quite a bit of the criteria that we would like. And then, of course, when you have 25%, you're going to get, what is that, 75% of it paid for, then I feel like it's a good deal for everybody. So that's where we're at this point. I guess some of the things that the grant talks about in the resolution, I just try to highlight a few. City plays an integral role in creating opportunities for community members to be physically active, multimodal transportation system through sidewalk infrastructure that is connected to community destinations, and that we recognize the sidewalk development needs and investment of our funding, which recognizes the importance of prioritizing the development of sidewalks where there's a public safety risk, documented use, bus stops, need to provide access to food outlets, and part of our sidewalk gap funding decision matrix. So I guess I would, there's a lot in this, a lot of attachments here, but I'll stand for questions and see what I missed.
Okay, I'll start to my right if there's any questions or comments.
Would these be standard 4-foot sidewalks?
No, they'll be a little wider. We 4 foot's kind of our normal in a residential area, but we know that this is a destination and we'll have to at least do a 5. We were thinking probably a 6 is what we were thinking, depending on what, I'm not sure what they actually require, but we're going to talk with them about that. We have to submit that, or be eligible to submit it, so we'll see what it is they want us to do, I guess. It'll be kind of a coordinated and, could be an iterative question, because I think they're going to want more than 4, but normally we just do 5, but if they want something wider, then we'll have to work with them on that.
And the existing sidewalks in the area are probably brick?
Yeah, I was thinking on Clark Street, they're a combination of brick and concrete and asphalt, actually, so that's really the ones we were able to see. Broadway has some concrete sidewalks that we'd be connecting to. But yeah, there's Clark Street's really got some old sidewalks on it. Other questions?
Any other questions? I do like the fact that it connects to 3 of the OCCK bus stops. I did drive the area, and on Spruce Street, there's sidewalks that go from College to the railroad tracks, if you pull that up. I did
Yeah.
notice that there's part of that sidewalk, if you get to 923, 925 Spruce Street, we need to address that. It's completely grown over the sidewalk. You cannot use
Yeah.
the sidewalk. So,
Okay.
so that would be
Is
on
that
the-
west of the railroad tracks there? Is that what you're talking about? On Spruce or near College, you said?
It would be, it's right by it's just before you get the railroad tracks as you're coming up Spruce towards
Okay.
the west. So, and then
Okay.
I noticed there's no sidewalks in that area between Clark Street and the railroad track.
Right.
But it looks like the way those homes are built, there's not enough building setbacks to put sidewalks in there.
It's pretty
So-
tight.
So,
Yeah.
so it looks like that, there's probably not much we can do about that.
We're gonna,
so.
we are gonna struggle with that connection at Clark, because that house is really close.
Yeah.
And we thought we may just have to figure out a back a curb sidewalk or something. We don't like to build those very often, but that might be a place we have to do it.
Anyway, but
Okay.
no, I think it does tie in nicely with the bus stops and the food bank. So I think it's well thought out. So.
Thank you.
Okay, any comments or questions from the public? If not, I will bring it back to the commission for action.
Mayor, I move we approve resolution number 23-8114, authorizing the city to submit an implementation grant application to the Pathways to a Healthy Kansas, a Blue Cross Blue Shield of Kansas grant program in partnership with LiveWell Saline County, and authorizing the city manager to submit the application.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Again, I'm trying to shorten this up to approve resolution 23-8114, authorizing the city to submit an implementation grant application to the Pathways to a Healthy Kansas, and authorizing the city manager to submit the application. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? That passes 5-0. That will bring us to item 6.4.
Item 6.4, authorize the city manager to execute a purchase agreement with Foley Equipment Company, a Kansas corporation, doing business as Foley Caterpillar, to purchase a new landfill compactor in the amount of $978,000.
Okay. Mr. Kowach.
Mayor, Commissioners, Jim Kowach, I'm the Operations Manager in Public Works. Thank you for your time this afternoon. Both of the next two items were expedited to bring before you. They're relatively urgent as far as trying to tie some things down. They both impact the solid waste fund balance pretty significantly. So we're trying to give you both items for your consideration so that you can also see the big picture as far as financial impact to the solid waste fund. Jacob, if you want to pull up the pictures on the compactor. Unfortunately, this is a sad story that's being repeated. We had a compactor fire in 2019 on April 11th, and it was October 14th of 2019. We brought a replacement to you for that compactor that was destroyed. That fire was an electrical fire. To the best of our knowledge, as far as identification. We found a low-hour unit from Canada, purchased it, and brought it here to Salina. That's the unit that we purchased. It's a 2004. It was low hours. Typically, on compactors, there's 5 years or 5 to 6 years or 10 to 12,000 hours on them between their successive rebuilds. This particular unit caught fire November 22nd of this past year. The operator saw smoke about simultaneously with the alarms going off in the cab of the vehicle. The fire suppression equipment alarm went off because it was out in the working landfill. The compactor, he moved it to the edge of the working area as to try to prevent a bigger fire in the active face of the landfill. He exited the vehicle as it was engulfed in flames. All of the crew in the area used fire extinguishers from adjacent equipment and tried to get it under control. They called the fire department immediately, but by the time the fire department was there, there was enormous damage sustained to the equipment. If you want to show the next couple of photos, that is the engine compartment, just looking at the back of it. And then the next picture, Jacob, is the cab, which the steering wheel and wiring and glass and everything are melted almost beyond recognition. But that piece of equipment did have fire suppression equipment on it. After the fires in 2019, we did install fire suppression systems on the dozer and both compactors. The fire suppression equipment in this, there's 2 separate canisters, and we did verify that one of those deployed, and the other one we're not sure if it deployed or not. It looked like it was still full, or it didn't indicate that it had went off. The cause of this fire, we don't know if the fire melted a hydraulic line and then the high pressure hydraulic oil burst into flames, or if it burst into flames causing the fire and then erupted with high pressure hydraulic oil hitting the turbocharger, which operates at like 1100 degrees. So it pretty much burst into flames. The operator escaped without injury. Valiant effort by our staff. No one was treated at the scene, but they did have exposure to a lot of smoke, and there were a few days there where a couple of guys had to stay home. Before I go any further, I want to introduce Larry Hammond, our landfill superintendent. He's been our superintendent for several years, does an awesome job with all of the paperwork and the logistics and everything that goes into managing the landfill. We've got a lot of strategic planning done with Larry, as well as Jim Teutsch, who has a history in operations, planning for the development of the landfill. This equipment, there is some urgency to it. Because it occurred last November, but we couldn't get quotes until we got our insurance settlement, which we just received March 2nd. We've been gathering quotes for all available equipment, used, rebuilt, new, and there is one compactor in the country on the ground right now, and it's in Wichita. One of the second one that's listed in your blue sheet actually sold last week, so it's not available anymore. We definitely prefer the new equipment. We've attached another spreadsheet that shows you the life cycle costs of these, as well as the information about the warranties, the relative hours, the number of rebuilds, that type of information detailed on each of the available equipment. But, it pretty much comes down to we've got one piece of equipment. There are other people interested in it, being the only one on the ground. We've brought it to you as quick as we can, trying to secure the purchase of it. It costs $978,000, and will, through its life expectancy, get rebuilt after 5 years, and then get rebuilt again after 5 years. So it has about a 15-year life. We have kind of went 5 to 6 years, 10 to 12,000 miles, or 10 to 12,000 hours per manufacturer's recommendations. But with the luck that we've been having, we want to be more conservative and start rebuilding them sooner. So 5 years or 10,000 hours will be the next when we do a significant rebuild on these. We do have 2 compactors as part of our operating plan, so they're required because they're approved by KDHE. Because this one's been down and we've had to work our second unit extremely hard, it's acquiring a lot more hours than anticipated. We had originally planned to rebuild this unit as part of next year's budget cycle for $450,000. That money will be deferred, but at the same time, because of the accumulated hours on 1842, the other unit, we're probably going to have to rebuild it a year earlier than we'd hoped. So I think we still will be rebuilding a unit next year, in addition to the purchase of this one. We have a bulldozer, 2 compactors, and a loader that are kind of the main equipment up on the working face. Like I alluded to, we rebuild at about 40% of the new cost after the first cycle. And then on the second cycle, or the second 5-year period, it costs a little bit more because they have to get into the real internal elements and of the the gears and the turnings and the wheels and all, it costs a little bit more. It's expected to be, instead of $450,000, like $580,000. So replacement cost goes up. The options are listed in the spreadsheet, or the blue sheet. There's not very many. We've also contacted BOMAG dealers. BOMAG dealers are not, do not meet the city specifications, but we were looking at all of our options. There is one in the country for a little over $1 million, but it has several deficiencies as far as our normal specifications. So we didn't consider it. Best Equipment doesn't have anything. They would rebuild one for us on demand, but they do not have anything. The fiscal note, I guess this is the only good news out of the whole story, and this kind of ties into the next item as well. The new compactor is $978,000. The insurance settlement on that is roughly $261,000. So the difference is $716,000, which is what we would need to pay for this new unit. We did a financial model in 2021 trying to estimate all of our equipment costs and our new cell construction, which typically runs $3 million. Second guessing on when we would do partial closure of certain cells, and then also speculating on current gas measurements when we would need to do landfill gas. So we ran this model. We're very conservative in our estimates in 2021 and projected a fund balance of $5.3 million at the end of 2022. Working with our finance director, Debbie Pack, she ran the numbers, and our actual solid waste fund balance at the end of last year was close to $6.9 million. So we were about $1.5 million ahead of schedule. Part of that was just the conservative nature. The other part of that was the increased tonnage that the landfill has been getting every year. We based our model on 85,000 tons a year. The last 3 years we've had 87,000, 88,000, and then 92,000 tons last year. So that increased tonnage is helping build our fund balance. The intention of that fund balance is for this capital expenditure, which is very expensive, but then also for our cell construction and our other major expenses as far as cell construction, cell engineering, and potential for closure and landfill gas. No, I don't want to say we've got money because of that overture here and then use the same excuse for the request in the next blue sheet, but we reran our model and included all of the expenditures for the soil that we're asking for in the next blue sheet, the compactor replacement, the increased costs for our next cell. Originally, cell 2021 construction cost was estimated at $3 million. The latest estimate is $3.8 million. Part of that is an extra $400,000 for soil, which is the topic of the next blue sheet, and part of it is just a $400,000 contingency based on just the volatility of construction costs that we've seen. Dan has been getting some really good prices for projects, but depending on the projects, I know some of our asphalt projects are equally volatile to the north of that. So a lot of construction, especially this heavy construction, depends on fuel, and we've had some major costs last year because of spikes in fuel prices, and we don't know what's going to happen next year when we bid our next cell construction. So it could be $3 million or it could be $3.8 million. So we'll get into all of those details, but the financial model, which is the blue colored sheet in your packet, shows a fund balance that drops down to a little over $5 million next year, but maintains a $7 million balance, even with all of the expenditures for major equipment that we've planned. We do have some other big equipment, another bulldozer. We bid it earlier this year, got no bids, and Debbie's going to talk to you next week about rebidding it, but that's over $1 million. That needs to come out of this fund balance as well. The cell construction, cell engineering are typically the only items that we bond for the solid waste landfill. All of the rest of these major capital expenditures need to come from this surplus fund balance. So if you don't have any other questions, or if you have any questions, I'll stand for those now.
Nope.
Have none.
Safe to assume that the fire suppression system on the CAT's going to be considerably better than the old unit. Probably goes without saying.
Our last one was a retrofit, which we had full confidence in. It cost about $10,000 to $11,000 for each unit, or $31,000 total for the 3 units. This one is a retrofit, but it's going to be actually included in the new machine as it's being produced. So it hopefully will be integrated better into the system. I did verify with the dealer, the new piece of equipment has 9 hours on it, so it is brand new, and it is. The cost does include delivery, which for something this big could be significant, and it does include a major warranty where they travel to fix it here, or responsible for transporting it to their shops in Wichita for the first 5 years. So those are both key elements for this large equipment, is the warranty work that's included as part of it as well, and
and we haven't talked about this a whole lot, and admittedly, it's a little bit of speculation on my part. But when we looked at the fire suppression systems, that conversation was about the fact that trash can get up into the compactor or a piece of equipment and catch on fire. And in my estimation, that's one kind of fire. If you lose hydraulic fluid and hit the turbocharger, that's probably a flash fire that takes out the fire suppression system along with it. So I think there's value in the fire suppression system, but just given the nature of the work that's being done and the grade that it's being done on, it's not an end-all be-all.
And did you say the fire suppression has been added to this unit?
yes.
But it's brand new in itself. It's not a used piece of equipment.
No, the fire suppression is included in the package for this new one.
Okay.
So it's not an add-on extra like we did on an existing unit in 2019.
So I take it the fire suppression is not a normal, because you keep saying it's an add-on, even though this is a new unit. So is it covered under any type of warranty, or is there any kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Is there a way, if the fire suppression does not work, do we have the ability to go back against the manufacturer or something for damages?
I'm not the right person to answer that, as far as I don't know if there's limited liability. I know there's not a guarantee that it's going to stop a fire, especially one that's a blast fire.
But
And the term you might be looking for is subrogating, which our insurance adjuster and insurance provider would help us with that. So as they try to assess the cause of the fire and the performance of the fire suppression system, they would be who we'd look to whether we think we have a claim, but they've not indicated that to be the case.
I did, Mayor and Commissioners, Jim Toich, Director of Public Works. I have spoken with our risk manager, who had also spoken to our insurance company. And I guess the first thing is their fire inspector was unable to determine the cause of the fire. Secondly, we know that the fire suppression alarm's activated, and we know that at least one suppression unit canister did initiate. Given that, they said there's really no, I don't know if I know the term, there's no avenue to approach, I believe Mike said subrogation. There's no way for us to, there's no cause that we could associate that there was a failure on the part of the suppression. I do want to re-emphasize that under that amount of pressure, 42 gallons of hydraulic fluid, whether it was at the leading edge of the cause of the fire or whether it was subsequent to the fire and caused the flash, there is no suppression system, whether it's installed during the build of the new equipment or as a retrofit. And I also don't want to overplay, I don't want it to be viewed that somehow we think that a retrofitted unit is not a sufficient fire suppression unit. We had a previous fire and those units deployed, and the total cost of damage was $300 to that piece of equipment. That $31,000 for all of those units has already more than paid for itself. But as far as we can tell, there is no reason to believe that we would have cause to go back on that company regarding the damages.
When the alarm sounds for the fire, do they have the ability to manually activate the fire suppression?
I believe so, yes. Larry is telling me yes. So there is a manual operation.
Just in case, okay.
Thank you.
Is there any relationship between the fires and the age of the area that they're working in? If you see where I'm going with this, is there more risk of a fire the older the cell is or the height they're working at?
This is relatively new. This cell was opened 5 years ago, or 4 years ago, so it's a relatively new cell. One factor, even though it was a low-hour unit that we've speculated is a 2004, and if it had not been rebuilt, those internal components may have failed with their life cycle versus not meeting the hours or the years. But even the insurance adjuster could not identify what the cause of the fire was. We have experienced quite a few. Most recently as last week, we had a couple dozen lithium batteries delivered to the landfill. That's another source of landfill fires. Unfortunately, some of them are small enough that the configurement of the wheels, they get caught in between the wheels, and as the iron wheels roll, it's a fire, and it rolls around and fire, and it rolls around and fire if the operator doesn't recognize it right away. But we do not believe this fire was a lithium battery, but Larry has had several lithium battery fires over the last few years. One did destroy our cover tarps, which were about a $30,000 loss. So we've increased our contact with the retail market, or the retail markets here in town. We've our Facebook posts, our website, our HHW advertisements on the radio, trying to make sure that people understand the proper disposal of lithium batteries, because the small ones to the larger ones, when they get broken or crushed, either in our trash trucks or by a compactor, they burst into flames, and it's a hot fire. So just another source of fires that we're dealing with right now.
Jim, you said one of these units was no longer available. Which one was it?
It was the second one on the list.
The 2006?
Yeah, it's the rebuilt 2006 for $680,000 that does have fire suppression. Since it's been rebuilt once, the life cycle on it would not be as long as the new one. So.
Yeah, and Jim touched on it, but you can see there in the staff report, accounting for the rebuilds, accounting for the varying life cycles, we tried to reduce that down to a cost per operating hour just to give you an objective assessment. And with the second one on the list no longer being available, it kind of limits your choices. But at the time, we were trying to help provide some comparison of a brand new 2023 to a 2006 in light of that price difference. And by staff's analysis, you had an operating cost for the brand new unit of $65.50 an hour compared to the, would that be 17-year-old unit at $63.35 an hour. And the unquantifiables are just the age on all the equipment.
Yeah, that's strictly the cost of the unit new and the rebuilds. There's a lot of internal maintenance that Larry and his staff do regularly at regular intervals. They'll pull the belly pans where stuff gets trapped underneath there. They'll clean it all out. We have a high pressure power washer. We're doing that more and more often just to try to make sure that we're protecting that equipment from onboard fires.
I guess that was my question, is the safety and preventive maintenance, is that program's in place?
Yes, it is. And they do all of that work, or what they're able to, with our own staff.
So I'm guessing when they
out there.
do a rebuild, one of the first things they do is replace the hydraulic hoses. Is that done locally here at Foley, or?
No, I think they're doing them at Wichita in their plant. They've got a plant just in Park City, north side of Wichita, where they do all the rebuild work that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? Comments? Questions or comments from the public? Okay, if not, I'll bring it back to commission for further discussion or a motion.
Mayor, move to authorize the city manager to execute a purchase agreement with Foley Equipment Company, doing business as Foley Caterpillar, to purchase a new landfill compactor in the amount of $978,000.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve, to authorize, to execute a purchase agreement with Foley Equipment Company, a Kansas corporation doing business as Foley Caterpillar, to purchase a new landfill compactor in the amount of $978,000. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That passes 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I couldn't sleep all last week hoping they wouldn't sell that one too.
That'll bring us to item 6.5.
This one is
Well,
just,
we're going to read, we need to read it here, Jim,
oh,
first.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. I like your enthusiasm.
Item 6.5, Schwan soil transfer. 6.5A, authorize the city manager to execute an agreement with TRR Inc., a Kansas corporation doing business as T&R Construction, in the amount of $523,380 to load, haul, stockpile, or place soils from the Schwan's detention pond to the City of Salina Solid Waste Municipal Landfill located at 4292 South Burma Road, the Old City Dump Site located at 1960 State Street, and Jerry Ivey Pond within Jerry Ivey Memorial Park located at 2465 Edward Street as specified in the agreement. And item 6.5B, authorize the city manager to execute a 30-day equipment rental agreement for a dozer and excavator with Foley Equipment Company, a Kansas corporation doing business as Foley Caterpillar, in the amount of $21,042 to prepare the Old City Dump Site located at 1960 State Street for cover soil remediation work.
Okay, now you're up.
All right.
All right.
All right. This one is equally as urgent, but for different reasons. The need to try to talk about the solid waste fund finances for all of these major items together so that you could see the big picture was important to us. The city was contacted, or actually Larry was bugging them about their big pile of soil and what they were going to do with it. They did contact city manager's office and offered the soil for free if we would pay the cost of loading and hauling it off. So the big detention pond was a huge improvement to the development out at the airport because of the high water situations around that area. This is going to slow that rising water substantially. There was about 87,000 yards taken out. They've used some of that soil for development on the Schwan's campus. Then we've also got just another significant project cleaning out what we call is the Centennial Ditch, which is just south of this location and flows along the east side of Centennial Road clear up to Magnolia. So we've got a lot of drainage improvements to this area. This pond was a big part of it, but Schwan's approached us with an offer for free soil, and free is free. It doesn't get any cheaper, and it doesn't get much closer to the landfill. So there was some urgency as far as trying to contact qualified bidders to what it would cost to load and haul this. And we came up with different locations that we may want to use it. We're still needing to do remediation work out at the old city dump, or what we would call the old shooting range, or the old animal shelter, or the old animal hospital. It's just on State Street out there on the west side of town. It's property that, since we dumped it there, we own it for life. So we've got to maintain it. We've been under an order from KDHE for the last several years to provide new cover for that. One plan was we were going to take some of the water when we cleaned out this Smoky Hill River, take some of the dredged material, dry it out, and use that as cover. The Smoky Hill River development is taking longer than we'd hoped, and that is not necessarily nice, clean fill dirt for cover either, so that was problematic. We looked at maybe using some of the Centennial ditch soil. There again, it's a lot of roots debris, rubble, not necessarily nice, clean fill dirt. And we saw this big pile of clean, relatively clean fill dirt, and we thought that is perfect for cover material on the old city dump. Now, we've been working slowly. This year, we led a contract and demolished the buildings. We've taken care of the septic systems. We had planned a budget for soil cover next year, but there again, it doesn't get any cheaper than free. So we looked at this as an opportunity to do something with the old city dump project. We've also got a long-term need, and by long-term, the next 150 to 180 years is the expected life of the landfill. We think that there's 7.1 million yards of soil that needs to be moved in the life of the landfill. Out of those 7.1 million yards, 3.4 million of it has to come from somewhere else. It's got to come from off-site, and that's a big number. But at the same time, we're going to need it long-term for the long-term development of the landfill. And I want to, Jacob, if you could pull up the maps. I think we'll kind of go through. This is a base map of the landfill. North is to the top of the page. Waterwell Road is the northern limit, and Burma Road is on the east side here. For you that go to the landfill, the entrance is right here. Here's the scale shack. Convenience area is right there. You kind of circle your way up around, and we're working on cell 20, which is right here, right now. This calendar year, we're designing cell 21, and next year we'll be building cell 21, which is right here. The old Subtitle D landfill is here. This is all of the new stuff that has a liner and is protected and all of that. These cells are about 10 acres each. We replace or build a new one about every 5 years. We're taking in about 90,000 tons of debris a year, so 450,000 tons of debris over a 5-year period. Larry uses anywhere from 50 to 75,000 cubic yards of soil to provide daily cover, and then ultimately we have to provide a layer of clean soil on top of it to kind of cap it and put it to bed. We haven't final covered 3 or 4, 5, or 20 or 21, this north-south leg yet. This is all we're still kind of ramping up. We're still finishing out the top of 5, the top of 20 while we're working in 21. 6 years from now is kind of a big step for us. That instead of continuing on this south side here, so that we can put this to bed and close it up, we plan on jumping to the north side and building cell 6 next. We'll go 6, 7, 8, 9, and kind of do this north tier next. And each one of those, if you count, 5 or 6 years, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, that's 40 some years, and then these are bigger cells down here. Those are in another 50 or 60 years. Our available soil needs to come from this hill that's right behind. Right now it's a wheat field behind the administration building. This low-lying area, but at the same time we have to maintain the drainage off of this hill down. There's actually a pond right here, comes down through here and then back out. This low-lying area, we can't get it too low to where it won't drain. We can't work down here until it's kind of redundant, until we're working down here. You don't want to use this borrow soil. That should be reserved for this whole half construction. We're going to be doing all this up here. And then if you'll show the other map of the borrow pits, you can tell where our current borrow pit is. We're at or below our planned grade already. We've been hauling down, clear down here to 21. Our future borrow site is this hill out here. The borrow, we have about half the borrow we need for the construction of the landfill, which is this section right here, this hill, and then this portion down here. This portion down here has to be reserved for when we're doing that part of the landfill. We can't excavate up here too soon because it needs to drain. So we need to take this hill and kind of work this together, keeping in mind you can't get too far into the excavation or you're into the groundwater, which starts a whole nother problem. So the long and the short of it is we're going to, if 5 to 6 years from now, we're going to be on the north side of the cell. We're still going to be finishing up these cells as we're topping them out, and that final cover is getting placed in there. So it's about 10 years before we can get this up to final grade and actually do a closure project. 10 to 15 years. We'll do a closure project, which will take a lot of soil. Larry needs 50 to 75,000 cubic yards every year, and we can't get it from here, and we don't want to use all of this up immediately. As part of this exercise of moving this free soil, I've entered into conversations with 2 sand companies here in town, Johnson Sand and TNR, and you'll see a quote from Johnson Sand on here called overburden. But that's the sandy soil above their payload that we could use as fill. They have to pay to get rid of it now. We need soil. Both of them are at the south end of town, that we're looking for possibly a cooperative relationship in the future where we could maybe purchase overburden soil at a reasonable cost. We won't need it immediately, but because we're planning for 200,000 yards to come from this borrow site to help build cell 21, but we're going to need soil for 6 and 7 up here too. And if we could have that delivered on site, especially with Larry's equipment and staffing shortages, where we need it, he won't have to have 1 to 2 people on scrapers 5 days a week trying to haul soil up there for daily cover and final cover. So in the long-term scheme of things, we need to start buying some extra soil, even though it might be somebody else's problem, 10, 20, 30 years from now. It's something that we ought to start taking care of as we go as far as a long-term planning operation. So we need a lot of soil. We do a new cell every 5 years. Most of those are about 10 acres. So we had this opportunity for free soil. We want to use it at the old dump. We needed soil delivered, but then we also need it spread out. So I got 2 different prices for that. Then we needed soil at the landfill. So I got all the prices and talked to the contractors. There was some urgency here trying to get this done so that we could bring it at the same time as the compactor. And then also there was some urgency expressed by Schwan's to try to get this moved as soon as possible. So TNR Dirt was the TNR Construction now was the lowest quoter on all of these projects you can see down through here. Remembering that this is free dirt, we're bidding for just moving it. It's not going to get any cheaper. Typically, contractor furnished costs us $10 a cubic yard or more. As I got all the quotes and started putting this together, they said, well, we need some dirt down at Jerry Ivey. And rather than looking at the spread and the prices, rather than getting quotes from all of I just approached the low bidder because it was for a small quantity or 6,000 yards, and asked them if they would provide the same information or the same price that they quoted for the old city dump for potential stockpile for the Jerry Ivey pond work that's going to be coming up later. Working with Jeff Hammond, he said they wanted to stockpile the soil, but they would be letting a contract to demolish the walls, fill it in, and then you guys have not quite decided on what the improvement or water feature might be for that. So that's yet to come. This is just stockpiling 6,000 yards for potentially filling the pond. So I had it all done for going to landfill, and then because it's a smaller quantity, the price goes up a little bit instead of the price going to the landfill. So the amount going to the landfill reduces. The price going to Jerry Ivey increases. So there's a $515,000 price tag if it goes to the old dump and the landfill. It's $523,000 if you throw in delivering the materials to Jerry Ivey. And finally, that's kind of the soil story. There's been a lot of cedar trees and elm trees, and over the last 30 or 40 years that that property's been out on State Street, it's overgrown, but there's a lot of glass and metal and stuff exposed that needs to be covered, as well as just almost vertical, one-to-one side slopes, where it just looks like a rainbow because there's so much glass showing. To maintain that long term, we want to take that one-to-one slope and flatten it down to like a 3-to-1. About like a county road ditch that is traversable. You can mow it, you can maintain it, and hopefully reduce the erosion on it. So to flatten out the side slopes and get this into a condition that we can maintain it long term, we need to rent an excavator, and then to level it all up, we want to rent a bulldozer, and then also use the bulldozer to help spread the topsoil, which we also got for free and moved with our own forces last summer. From a stockpile out on North Street from Great Plains, Kubota. So we need soil. We need the equipment for us to do the work before we get the soil. The fiscal note, real similar. Our solid waste fund balance is solid. It's $6.9 million as of the end of last year. We've reran the model with all of these new prices and expenses. And verified that we can maintain a minimum of a $5 million fund balance. Even though we claim there's a $500,000 target, because there's such huge swings in equipment and prices and everything else, $500,000 would be the bare minimum. We think that needs to, I think Ms. Pack said, to be 20% of our annual operating budget, it needed to be about $1.5 million minimum. So $5 million is what we're comfortable with. The other thing is just, I'd mention it here, is that the 6,000 cubic yards that would be going to Jerry Ivey Pond, the Parks Department would pay for. It's $44,000. So it makes the Public Works portion $478,680. So we have a good, the solid waste side has a good fund balance. Parks says they have available funds in their operating budget for this soil. I think it's a good deal for the planned improvements at the Jerry Ivey Pond in Jerry Ivey Memorial Park. So if you have any questions, I'll try to answer those before we get to it.
Let's start over here to my left.
Nope.
None.
The old landfill on State Street, I don't remember that at all. When was that closed?
I'm going to look to Mr. Toich here.
It was before my
When we built
time.
the new
It was
training center.
the animal shelter as long as I remember.
Yeah,
That
it
would
was a
have been back in
landfill,
the-
and it was an animal shelter, then it was a police firing range.
2016.
Jim
That's
Toich,
when we
Director of
ceased
Public
use,
Works.
but I think his question is, when did it stop being the
landfill.
landfill?
Yeah, from my childhood, I remember the landfill out by the sewage treatment plant.
I guess the first thing I would say is please keep in mind that Salina has, I believe, 16 of these sites. So more than one of these sites may have been open at one time.
Okay, yeah, the
I will
municipal
tell-
golf course was a site.
I'm sorry?
The municipal golf course was a landfill site.
Yes. But I do not have the information as to when that particular old city dump closed. I think most of them closed because of when the old landfill dump remediation program was established, I believe was around the early 70s, or it was about the time when landfills started being Subtitle D landfills and stopped being old city dumps. And I think, I believe that was in the early 70s. When that particular dump closed, I can't answer that question right now. I'll certainly get you the answer, though.
Okay, so I guess my other question, the landfill I remember by the sewage treatment plant, do we have to do the same thing, maintaining and adding soil to that?
So I mentioned that we had about 16 of these, and the state inspector and I and others in general services have toured all of these. And this is the last old city dump that required remediation. someone from the public or perhaps one of you may recall that we had one. There was an old city dump site at the water plant, at the wastewater treatment plant, and we did remediation on that, I think around 5 years ago. And then there was an old city dump across the street from Thomas Park, and we did that, I think, in the last 3 years. This is the last of all of those old city dumps that currently require any remediation. But something that Jim pointed out, even if the city were to later decide that they want to sell this property, according to the people that we talked at the state, the city still would maintain responsibility for whatever happens to that waste. So it just makes sense for us to do this maintenance periodically. So.
Okay. It's a little off topic, but I've really gotten interested in the landfill technology. When you build a cell, how deep down do you dig?
The best way for me to answer that is you dig as deeply as you can so that you remain above the requirement to stay away from groundwater.
Okay.
So, like in our landfill, where I believe it's 5 feet above where the groundwater is undisturbed soil. So then on top of that 5 foot of undisturbed soil is a foot of highly compacted 10 to the -7th clay. And then on top of that is a series of different geomembranes that provide what's known as the dry tomb, where all of the waste is contained in. But the actual depth really depends on the location of your groundwater.
And then that dirt that is excavated is used for cover.
Yes, it's used for, one of the things that you have to control at landfills is they call them run-on and run-off controls. So it's very important for us to know where stormwater goes. When stormwater comes in contact with trash, it becomes leachate, and there are a separate set of controls for those. So a lot of the soil is used for the creation of berms, and the soils are used as daily, intermediate, and final covers also.
Okay. And
So
then-
as Jim mentioned, that's all accounted for in that calculation in terms of the deficit that we have, and then on an annual basis, we have a need ongoing. So it's not as if we're purchasing this for the 180-year need out in the future. This is a more immediate need.
Will this soil go to this current barrel site? Where are you gonna put all the dirt?
Okay, the 200,000 cubic yards that we want to haul as part of the next landfill cell construction will be right across the road from cell 21, right at the far south end. The 50 or 60,000 yards that we get from Schwan's will be added to that pile, because just in the next 5 years, we're going to need anywhere from the minimum 250,000 up to 375,000 cubic yards to work that south end. We don't want to rob it all from our future borrow site. The other thing that we have to kind of plan for, we've had our landfill consultant map the whole area, and Jim talked about that high density clay. We don't have to ship that in. We have some of that on site, and but we have to save it and use it as the liner to be in compliance and keep the liquids in the actual cell, the bathtub that it's sitting in as we build up. So we've got to manage that soil, not only where it's from, but what type it is and where it goes. So.
Okay, and using it for Jerry Ivey Pond is a good move, and I see Mr. Hammond is here, and I've discussed this with city manager, so I'm going to say it publicly that I think we need to fence that pond off so that people know that that pond is going to be filled in and no more, and it's not a big surprise when the dump trucks start coming in.
Yeah, as far as I know, that will be brought before you later this summer. So.
Yep.
My question dealing with the Jerry Ivey, you said that soil's going to be stockpiled. Will it be stockpiled at Jerry Ivey, or will it be? It will. Okay.
Yeah, it'll be on the far south end, the kind of perimeter road between the storage shed and the playground.
I wanted to make sure it wouldn't be stockpiled somewhere else, and we're going to pay to bring it back.
No, it's not right next to the pond, but it's very, very close in proximity.
Yeah, and
Here I thought
so
we were
something
good.
will be coming back to us as far as getting that drained and getting that, whether we're able to push those walls in and use that soil, because we really need to get that drained sooner than later, because it's always the first body of water in the state of Kansas to have the blue-green algae. So.
And that one's out of Jim's bailiwick.
Yeah.
but Parks and Deputy City Manager are working with the design firm that we've used to finalize that design so we can get it out to bid.
Yeah, we're working on that currently. We should have a design finalized in the next, I'm hoping in the next 7 days. But we're going to go ahead and drain the pond and get a fence around it here in the next week or two. So we're going to start that process pretty quickly. And hopefully with the transportation of the soils, we'll be able to work with TNR to, we may be able to do this where they can deliver it right on site in the hole.
That would be great.
We're gonna try and work that.
That
We
would
just
be-
we gotta get that other contract out, and we'll do that the best we can.
That's what I was hoping, that we could just do it all at once. My second question is, if we stockpile all this at the landfill, is there an erosion rate? Do you lose part of that soil over time? If you do, is it significant? It's not. I got somebody back there shaking their head no. So okay.
Well, you'll lose
Yeah.
some, but we've actually, when we built Cell 20 3 years ago, we stockpiled some there, and they're still using part of that. And then just tracking it back and forth. They get some on the road, and we can't let it leave the site. We have a responsibility to keep it on our property as far as stormwater. But I don't know that it would be a significant amount.
Okay. They're saying no. I'm not versed on that, so it's just a question. So, okay. Any other?
That's a lot of money for free dirt, but
Yeah, I think if we were paying for the dirt, that's what I thought. Man, that'd be a big bill. So, okay. Any comments or questions from the public? Got somebody behind you,
Oh,
Jim.
I'm sorry.
You're fine.
Couldn't hear you.
You're fine. I just snuck up on you. Ben Winholt, Salina. The question I have, when you talk about getting free dirt and getting it from whoever you can, is there a program in place for when any of the housing subdivisions come into play and all the basements are dug out and all of the holding ponds, drainage ponds that are put into each one of these? Is the city able to get any of that soil, or where does all of that soil go?
Do you want to try? So I think in the past, we have accepted free soils from folks around town. We haven't necessarily paid to haul it. They brought it to us, but we have accepted free, clean landfill soil for our use in the past.
And you said free, and I'm going to bring this up, I think. Does this have to be tested to make sure it's not contaminated?
Well, on occasion, we'll have people come to us with soil that's contaminated, and then it becomes a question of getting it tested. We'll accept that in the landfill as a waste to be paid to dispose of, but then we've been through the process of testing it and determining whether we can use it as cover soil for the landfill cells, and that just kind of varies on
Kind of the same thing with the
case-by-case
Jerry
basis.
Ivey pond. It would have to be clean.
Right.
Yeah.
And some of it's, heavy metals and contaminants, just depending on an industrial site, and there's a whole KDHE process for that.
So,
And then, Jim, you might touch on the changes to the agreement from what was in the
Oh,
packet.
yes. Working with council last week, we're trying to get this agreement in place, making sure that the language we had with the property owner, Schwan's, also trying to work with the contractors that I had gotten quotes from. We put together the contract like noon Thursday, and we needed to get it in the packet and out to you folks by Thursday afternoon. The contractor, TNR Dirt, did not have a chance to review that before getting included in the packet. I had made some assumptions based on their quote, but because of the way the quotes were delivered, it was not a formal RFP with everything spelled out. It was email, messages as far as quantities, locations, character of the work, but the details about kind of specifying each location, specifying the completion date. The TNR specified the number of working days, but they didn't really tie it into a completion date. They were the shortest time period quoted. Working with Schwan's, we really don't have a date that the soil or the site will be released to us yet, so it's hard to say here's the end if you don't know the beginning. So we tried to open it up after talking with Todd Roberg and TNR Dirt this morning, as far as had not specified the retainage in the contract. Normally it's 10%. Didn't specify it in any of the documents I had sent them, so we reduced it to 5%. I had thrown in what I like to call as a standard liquidated damages for late completion. We have not used that a lot, but we are in hopes of using it in the future. But I had not talked to any of the bidders about that. So even though I had included that in the contract, I agreed that that was an unfair assumption, and I've taken the liquidated damages out. We have a kind of extended close or ending date of August 31st. We tried to clean up the language, change the retainage. Some of those kinds of things were a redlined copy of the exhibits B, C, A, B, and C of your contract that you received at today's meeting that were not necessarily in your packet. So if you have any questions about those changes, I wanted to make sure that we got those in front of you before we got approval of the contract. So those were actually finalized just this morning before noon. So.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Any other comments from the public?
I'll ask.
Okay.
Norman Mountain, Salina. Do you ever observe the contractors in this city that do not observe or comply with OSHA regulations? I have. Tying number 6.2 and 6.5 together, there are contractors or contractor that has violated OSHA laws. We're getting into deep water here. Now with this issue of what to do with this contaminated dirt, talk with the Corps of Engineers because they're having this problem. They've already dredged John Redmond Reservoir. They're trying to treat that dirt. So this is going to be a bigger problem. The price of this dirt's going to go up. So we're going to dredge Canopus Reservoir when they get the money. They're going to dredge Fall River, and they're bringing out-of-state contractors in to do this. So you're having it's going to be a big problem. As to one of these items you discussed, there is a hydraulic oil out there that does not burn. I've worked with it. So with that trash compactor, you can buy a hydraulic oil that does not burn. Check with Mr. Rogers at the airport. He knows about it.
Yeah, thank you.
Good afternoon, John Blanchard, Salina. I'm going to kind of continue on with the theme of the contaminated soil and the potential, I should just say the potential for contaminated soil. We don't know if it is or not. Obviously at the landfill, there's not really a major concern, but when you start hauling fill into public parks where it's going to come in contact with a lot of the citizens and a lot of children, I think you want to test and verify, not just trust that it doesn't, especially considering that we have an ongoing contamination problem out at the source of where the soil comes from. So I would say on the soil that was dug out at the Schwan's plant that, whatever we need to do to make sure that that's not contaminated, because that really could come back to bite us. Second thing is that I would recommend, I think I heard that we're going to be cleaning some ditches, some drainage ditches, and that there would be a lot of fill associated with that. I would just recommend that we say as a definite, none of that fill be used at Jerry Ivey. Just because with road runoff and all kinds of other things that tend to happen in roadside ditches, there's typically a lot of heavy metals and other contaminants in those soils. And so I think if we just kind of focus on if the soil is good at Schwan's and it's been tested and we can verify that, you know, let's use it to fill the pond, but let's don't use the roadway ditch fill to fill those ponds at Jerry Ivey. Thank you.
Yeah, and I don't think there was any plan to use any of the other ditch we were using. And I did ask about the contamination, so that soil will be tested.
Yeah,
no
and just
matter
to be
what,
clear,
yeah.
my comments about contamination
Right.
were soil owners that have approached us
Right.
and said, I have a contaminated site I need to excavate, can I give you the dirt? And we take a look at it on a case-by-case basis and determine whether it needs to be disposed of in the landfill as a contaminant or whether we can use it as fill dirt or cover dirt at the landfill. So we will take a look at the Schwan's dirt, but I want to be clear, I was not speculating that the Schwan's dirt is contaminated.
And I would hope that with the pond, Jerry Ivey Pond, that it would be topped with some good quality topsoil for a final grade.
Agreed. Our designer will help us spec all that out.
Commissioner Davis, I believe you had another question?
Yeah, regarding the liquidated damages for failure to complete, I noticed the contract that we have, number 6, it just says time is of the essence. Time is of the essence in relation to the performance of the obligations. There's not much point in putting that in there if there's no penalty for not, I mean, it's a useless sentence. I mean, of course, time's of the essence for any project. And if we're going to suffer, or someone working with us is going to suffer financial harm because it's not completed on time.
Right, well, normally, when administering a contract with a completion date, you ask the contractor for a schedule that shows that they can accomplish that by that date. And then when they miss those deadlines, then you're working with them constantly. With that not always being successful, we have instituted liquidated damages for late completion. And liquidated damages, as the definition, is merely to recover the cost that the city, additional costs the city would incur for the contract going longer. It's not necessarily intended to be a disincentive or an incentive to complete on time. It's just if we plan for 1 year and a project takes 2 years, our cost of contract administration, inspection, testing, everything doubles. So we try to make those liquidated damages compensate us for the additional time.
Because we've worked with those in the past, and, you know, if there are delays, you know, much like during the pandemic, you know, there were unforeseen supply issues that no one knew about when the contract was written. So it's not that we're not pliable in this, but, I mean, it's the only teeth that I think we would have to ensure that this gets done. I mean, if we're saying, I believe you said that this one was time sensitive as well. I mean,
Yes.
if it's time sensitive, I think the contractor needs to approach it as, you know, this is not what he does on Saturdays when he's finished all of his other work. This is a
Right. When I
job.
approached all of the potential contractors, I had them quote the price and the time that they could reasonably accomplish the work. I did not mention that there would be liquidated damages assessed if they failed to complete the work on time. So,
And I think it might be useful to explain what Schwan's is doing. Part of this is we collectively are going to have to work around Schwan's schedule. So you might describe what they're
well,
doing.
it just we're trying to coordinate this with Schwan's Construction, but if you drive by there, TNR's crushing rock and stone at one end. There's another contractor, Votes Parga, crushing rock and stone and concrete at the other end. Schwan's is taking soil from this pile as we speak and continuing to build building pads out of it. So the site is still in flux. But before we take possession of it, what we plan on doing is hopefully stopping all the other operations, doing a survey with using GPS and basically doing a base map and developing a 3D model. So when we haul to Jerry Ivey, we take a picture of it, a 3D picture of it before they haul to that site, and then we take a 3D picture of it after, and we can calculate the quantity that went there. The same thing for the old landfill or city shooting range, or to the old city dump versus the landfill. What we don't want is, we've got kind of competing interests. That Dan just led a project for Centennial Road. Contractors bid that with the assumption Schwan's has free dirt right there at the north end of it we can use to widen this road. So we're not going to pay for that on our project. He's going to pay for it on his project. So coordination of previous commitments to this stockpile and what we're going to do with it is still going to be pretty significant. So us saying, you know, we're going to beat you up if you don't finish by the completion date doesn't necessarily seem fair. That we've called out, they need to coordinate with the other contractors. They need to try to complete by the completion date, which will demonstrate a haul schedule that approaches that. So.
Okay, so is there any need for number 6 in there at all? Time is of the essence. It just seems like something somebody would get hung up on later. I mean, it serves no useful purpose whatsoever. The way your explanation was perfect explanation. I'm satisfied with that. But it just, I mean, we can't even tell them when we want it done by, so there's no point even putting a reference into when it has to be done by.
That's kind of just saying, yeah, we all want to get it done, but there's no teeth in that particular clause.
I'm gonna guess that TNR gets it done before they tear out Centennial Road.
So we're assuming that's the case. From a legal perspective, is there any added value from that phrase as it's currently written?
I would say that its absence has more significance than its presence, if that makes sense. If you consciously delete it, it
allows them to.
It truly suggests that time is not of the essence. I would generally suggest that that's, I think, am I correct, the reference you were making was in that proposed access agreement?
Yeah, number 6.
Yeah.
Yes. That is a point that, I mean, that whole scheduling, as Mr. Kowach has alluded to, that document is yet to be finalized, and I think we'll have to take into consideration everything that's been mentioned here in terms of this multifaceted scheduling scenario. So I think.
So I'm going to make an assertion, and you tell me if I'm wrong. I mean, while we don't have a specified completion date and we don't necessarily have liquidated damages, we would be in a position to say we've agreed time is of the essence, and it doesn't appear that you're making sufficient effort to expedite in light of everything else we learn, you know, with Schwan's and the other items. It at least gives us an ability to say we all agreed that we're going to try to move this along, and it doesn't appear that it's moving. And just in a more general sense of how we might apply that in any contract situation, at least gives us some presumption that we're all supposed to be moving this along.
Well, and in the contract, and not to negotiate the contract, but it almost seems the fact that we're putting a date in there, not knowing when it sounds like we have other things that are going to deal with this. It almost seems to me like you would put X number of days after the start, because it's hard to put a date in when we don't know we're starting because of the fact that there's other people going to be taking some of this dirt. I would almost say you work with the contractor and say, however many days, 60 days after the beginning, they will be completed, or something like that. And again, I have no problems taking out the, the paragraph that deals with liquidated damages, because usually they're aware of that when they enter into a bid, because they may take that into their bidding, which they weren't able to do in this case. So to me, it only makes sense to take out the liquidated damages.
Well, we started at June 30th, and I approached them with the end of July, and they felt like they felt a lot more comfortable or confident that they would complete it if we gave them till the end of August. So that was almost, they've declared their own kind of
That is if we give them
performance.
a chance to get to the dirt by a certain date
Right.
too.
Well,
so.
we hope we move forward with that
Yeah,
relatively
so-
quickly, but.
So I'll let you guys look at that. So. Okay, any other questions or comments?
Okay, we've got two different items
yeah.
for your consideration. One is the actual soil, the agreement with Schwan's and TNR construction to move the soil to all the different locations specified in the agreement. Moving the soil or awarding the contract to TNR with amendments, postponing or not approving. We've got the same thing with the equipment needed for our staff to prepare the remediation site at the old shooting range. There again, we got authorizing the city manager to do a 30-day equipment rentals with Foley Equipment, doing business as Foley Caterpillar in the amount of $21,042. A contract with amendments or postponement or rejection. So those are the two items for your consideration.
Mayor,
Yes.
may I ask for what I think would only take about 3 minutes to pose a question to the city manager and Mr. Kowach?
We can do that. Should we take a 5-minute break? Would that help you?
Well, that would more than take care of it. I
We'll take
think.
a 5-minute break. We'll be back in at 5:45.
Thank you.
Okay, we're back from our recess. Mr. Bingston.
Thank you. Doesn't warrant any comment.
Okay. Sounds like some of the conversations at home. Okay, with that, I will bring it back to the commission for action, and it looks like we have two separate items we need to deal with.
Mayor, I move we authorize the city manager to execute an agreement with TRR Incorporated, a Kansas corporation doing business as T&R Dirt Construction, up to the amount of $523,380 to load, haul, stockpile, or place soil from the Schwan's detention pond as specified in the agreement.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for the city manager to execute an agreement with TRR Inc. Up to the amount of $523,380 to load, haul, stockpile, and place soils from Schwan's detention pond. All of those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That passes 5-0. That will lead us to 6.5B.
Mayor, I move we authorize the city manager to execute a 30-day equipment rental agreements for a dozer and excavator with Foley Equipment Company, Kansas Corporation, doing business as Foley Caterpillar, in the amount of $21,042 to prepare the old city dump site located at 1960 State Street for cover soil remediation work.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to allow the city manager to execute a 30-day equipment rental agreement for a dozer and excavator with Foley Equipment Company in the amount of $21,042 to prepare the old city dump site located at 1960 State Street for cover soil remediation work. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That also passes 5-0. Thank you very much. So nobody else offers us anything free for a while. So. Okay, we have no development business. That will lead us to other business. Does any commissioner have anything to bring before? I might look at the city manager. I know there was an issue brought to us last week on some of the holes in the right-of-ways. Is there anything we want to address, or?
Well, I'm actually going to call on Jim
Okay.
Toich, Public Works Director. He followed up on that a little bit.
Okay. You only thought you were going to go home, didn't you, Jim?
Mr. Mayor and Commissioners, Jim Toich, Director of Public Works. I appreciate Mr. Winholtz bringing this topic to us. Since last week, I've been in contact with the construction manager for Clearwave a number of times this over the last several days. We continue to meet with Clearwave in biweekly meetings, and in those meetings, we have multiple city staff, to include the utilities department, and representatives from the crews and the construction manager for Clearwave attending those meetings. So we had the opportunity to, the gentleman's name is Mr. Dwyer, Mr. Jack Dwyer with Clearwave. So I had the opportunity to talk to Mr. Dwyer at length about the items that Mr. Winholtz brought up. I will say that I misunderstood, or at least miscommunicated to Clearwave to some degree, and Mr. Winholtz has cleared up that misconception or whatever before the commission meeting started. I had been focusing on the holes that were receiving boxes, that the holes that were having boxes in, and those are not necessarily, or they weren't the holes that he was talking about particularly. Because we communicate regularly, I will call Mr. Dwyer in the morning, in fact, and discuss this with him. And I also got Mr. Winholtz to allow me to pass along his cell phone number. Mr. Dwyer said I would be happy to speak with him directly and kind of go through our procedures with him. And there are a number of things that that I can speak with him about as well. I guess the other important part of this is subsequent to the issue being brought up, we have a full-time inspector for Clearwave, a city employee, one of our inspectors. That person met with every single crew that is part of the Clearwave contract and personally talked to every employee about the procedures for how they fill holes and tamping and replacing sod and placing soil on tarps and all of the things that they're doing. And also subsequent to the last week's meeting, the city engineer and the inspector went and viewed every single hole that they had opened and where all the work the crews are doing. So we've had several conversations. This is really, now that they've completed the transport line coming into Salina, it's called Light In, and they're now working in the very first fiber deployment area. It's probably not it certainly wasn't unexpected from us that we're going to have these kinds of issues. So far, Clearwave has been very, very good at responding to our concerns. And so I think from that perspective, I think this is being worked out. I would also say that after his comments that all of the crews with Clearwave now have hand tampers that they did not have before. So I appreciate that comment last week because for one reason, because they now have the tools that they need to successfully do the job. We may have some additional work with them about how much lift, how much amount of soil that they put in the hole before they start tamping, but that will be an ongoing conversation that I have with them tomorrow. And then finally, our inspector and the construction manager and all of the crews just participated in a safety meeting, a mandatory safety meeting for all of the crews. And among other things, we also discussed the traffic control and just general safety of the work area, especially when they're dealing with high traffic areas like the work that they're doing on Ohio. We saw some need to improve the signage, and the crews, as I'm told, will all be equipped with the necessary signage to make sure that that happens and that those signs follow those crews as they're working through the project. And I'll just end with, it's probably an ongoing conversation. This is the very first fiber deployment area in the city. We have a number to go. We have a number of other fiber companies that are interested in Salina. So I appreciate Mr. Winholtz's attention to it, and we will link the construction manager and Mr. Winholtz together and make sure that our inspectors continue to inspect the sites as the work goes on. So hopefully that answers the question and satisfies the complaint.
Yeah, I know it sounds like we have some other fiber companies coming, so we have some standard outline for them when they come. This is what we expect of you, and so on and so forth.
Yes,
okay.
Absolutely. And we'll continue that. I had a discussion with Clearwave today. There's some just public messaging that I felt that could help in this situation. So we're talking about that. We've talked about the safety issue. We've talked about these holes. And Mr. Winholtz will get an opportunity to speak with Mr. Dwyer directly, and they'll be able to also communicate with each other. I did also want to mention, if I could just get this on public record, I also spoke to Clearwave today, and they also wanted to emphasize that any citizen can call them with a question, a comment, a complaint, whether it's a question about the equipment, the crews, the holes in their yards, whether it's yard or right of way, all of those kinds of questions. Clearwave would ask that you call 1-913-586-8008. and you can speak with a Clearwave representative, and they should be able to help you with whatever that situation is.
Is there any way we could post that on our webpage?
Absolutely.
Since we, because somebody may go to the city site since it's,
Yes, absolutely. I did not want to do that until I got word from the right person in their corporate before I did this. I actually called 5 numbers today trying to verify which number should citizens call. But yes, we will get this added to our website.
Perfect. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Just a later
question.
Yes.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
What is the reason they're going through the front yards rather than the easement?
So it is part of the agreement. This is not my subject area of, this is not my expertise. I wish that Mr. Andrew were here because he could probably do a better job than I will. But the agreement that they have does not give them authorization to work in the easements in their backyard. I don't know if,
I assume it's a function of rights of way. They are authorized federally and by our own ordinance to be in the rights of way.
Correct.
Which are in the front yards.
And not all subdivisions have easements. Some of the old subdivisions have no easements, so that's where the right-of-ways come in, so that's the reason.
And we've talked about this before as a group, but as much as the average person understandably would think that we have much more oversight and control over this, we don't, thanks to deregulation.
Then a little follow-up from me. When AT&T went through my backyard last year, I got a low spot. Does anyone know where I can get a wheelbarrow full of dirt?
Schwans.
we could probably find some, I'm sure.
It can be hauled there. It costs you to be hauled. So it's just a matter. It's not free dirt, remember? So anyway,
Just one question. If there's damage to a sprinkler system in that, by the sidewalk, whose responsibility is it to fix it?
The contractors.
All right.
Even if it's in the rights of way.
And the homeowner would call that.
I don't know because that's we better verify that before we
the
make
authority
that.
There is not inherent authority for sprinklers to be in the right of way. There's authority for utilities to be in the right of way, and so I think it may be on the contractor and their goodwill as to
because for a lot of time there's a second water meter, which is obviously in the right of way, and then it has to be connected to get across the sidewalk, and I'm assuming they would not put this right next to a water meter, but there's a certain amount of unavoidable.
Well, if it's a water service connection, then that's a utility function. If it's, I'd have them in my own yard. I've got sprinkler heads that go right to the back of curb.
Yep.
Those are in the city right of way as a private installation.
Right, but part of the private installation has to go through the right of way to connect to the yard.
I'm making a distinction between the service line that connects to our system being a public utility component, and then the sprinkler itself as a private improvement in the right of way.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other business?
Another one. For the upcoming strategic planning session, if we're going to be talking about housing and infill, if you could just get a little blurb on our property code enforcement, how aggressive as a city our policy is now, and if we can use that as part of our tools for its neighborhood rehab.
I'm already planning on more than a blurb. that one's a topic.
Okay. Anything else?
I might add the Kansas Aquafest that occurred over the weekend over at Tony's Pizza Event Center in the park. Was a huge crowd over there, and we need to be pretty grateful that they chose Salina, and they're going to be here another 5 years, I believe. So.
I think we have the farm show coming in this week.
Farm shows this week.
Yeah,
it's a busy time over there.
Yeah, so good for the community. So, it's like other people's money being spent in Salina.
like other people's money, don't you?
Yeah, I do. Helps us all out, so. Okay, with that, we will go to Citizens Forum. This is an opportunity for someone to address the commission about a subject. Again, we will limit your time to 3 minutes, please.
This is some information that might be good, Norman Mount, Salina, for the landfill. These dead batteries, they will continue to leak electricity and eventually break open in the soil. If you would see the chemicals that we're putting in that soil, you may better maybe not be taking these batteries. It's got, oh geez, hydrochloric acid, sulfuric acid, nitric acid, hydrofluoride. I can't pronounce these. So it's something you need to look at. One of these batteries that just goes into vehicles about the size of a suitcase. It weighs about 1,000 pounds. It contains a lot in here. And this is going to come. So, Mr. Winholtz, are you going to get a consultant fee for this?
I hope.
Take the money. Take the money.
John Blanchard, Salina. Thank you, Mr. Winholtz. And Norm, you're slipping. I want to read you something that was reported in the Washington Post on March 14th of last week, and I'm going to read it and then ask a couple questions. The Environmental Protection Agency is proposing the nation's first drinking water standards for a group of human-made chemicals, commonplace in consumer items, that pose a greater danger to human health than scientists once thought. The proposal could force water utilities to spend billions of dollars to comply with the EPA's planned limits on polyfluoroalkyl and perfluoroalkyl substances, PFAS, and we had someone here last summer from the state talking about PFAS chemicals. Even though those limits are less stringent than those limits are less stringent than advisory levels for safe consumption the agency set last year. Officials say that small and rural utilities will have access to federal subsidies and assistance, blunting the financial impact of the rule. It would require water utilities to detect contamination at 4 parts per trillion. That would be a regulation. Currently, the advisory is 70 parts per trillion. So I've got a few questions that come to mind when I read that and start worrying about the health effects caused by PFAS substances of being fertility problems, thyroid problems, and several different forms of cancer. Does the city of Salina test for PFAS chemicals in the water system?
To the current standard.
Okay, to the current standard. So if you can come back next week with a number of parts per trillion that we have, that would be great. The second thing is do you anticipate any impact on our cleanup activities for the Schilling Plume project? And the question mainly being, are we cleaning up to a certain level that this may have some impact on? And then just the last thing is that one of the recommendations in the article was that they basically said that 0 level is good, but that 4 parts per trillion is the lowest level that they're able to test for. And so one of the things they recommend is that public utilities provide their public with information about those chemicals. So thank you.
Thank you.
Ben Winholtz, Salina. I'm well known today. I need to go with Norman's thing. I think I need some type of kickback for giving out my phone number. I think I'm saving the company that's putting the dirt back. I could be saving a lot of money from having to come back later on. It was pretty funny that Jim brought up that they had a meeting on safety issues because over the weekend on Friday, their trailer that they use, which is double axle trailer, blew one of its tires on Ellsworth, and so they weren't able to move it. So they parked it over the weekend with cones around it. The thing is, they parked it right in front of a fire hydrant. So, wow. Okay, so much for safety. All right, that's not the reason I'm up here, and hopefully you're going to give me a little more time because I've used up part of it. I'm bringing up the tennis complex because next week the public hearing comes before you again, and with a 3-minute time limit, I may not be able to cover everything that I think is important. After last week's meeting, I revisited the video, and I noticed that on both sides of the table, there was no mention of the $40,000 a year contribution of taxpayers' money that STA gets towards operations as long as the partnership is solvent. And this is taxpayers' money. So if you're taking into that time period of the $500,000 at $50,000 a year for a 10-year period, that's $400,000 that we, the taxpayers, are given to STA to help run this thing. And there was no mention. When Commissioner Lombine asked about it last week, the director named off different ways that they were going to get funds, and never was there a mention of the $40,000 a year from the city. The president of the STA talked about the need of renovating this building to possibly bring in big-name tournaments. Well, we've heard this song and dance before with the soccer fields. Salina Soccer Club, back in the day, gave around $600,000 to the soccer field cause with the promise of possibly bringing in money to the community with tournaments. A Google search last week brings up that the last outside tournament, not affiliated with the Parks and Recs happened back in October of 2017. Okay, so a Salina Soccer Club Google brings up their Facebook page, which has their last post in the fall of 2021. So soccer club may not even be in existence anymore. Yet we still have the soccer fields. I realize they're being used, but there is a lot of maintenance with those with no tournaments, outside tournaments coming in and no money whatsoever. And so with that being said, I'm on board with Commissioner Longbine's suggestion of last week with STA providing them proving themselves for at least 1 year with the promised extra money coming into the community tournaments before we actually give them money, either borrowed or whatever. And if they're going to use the...
About another 30 seconds, please, man.
Okay.
Thanks.
If they're going to use the excuse that they need the building to accomplish these tournaments, that's a piss poor excuse because they already have a gazebo and plenty of grass area to bring in tents. I'm sure that's what was done with the Oakdale Park tournaments back in the past. So let's think hard about this as far as the naming rights. If there's a stipulation that the $500,000 will not be given unless we give them a loan. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi. Yeah, Ken Ritz from Salina. There are a number of things that we really need to have genuine discussions about versus presentations and then it goes different directions. The quality of our drinking water, if you drink water out of the tap, and of soil contamination. There are new chemicals that are of great concern, but we've kind of forgotten how long we've known about lead and did what we needed to do to cut way down on the amount of lead that's going out into the environment with new applications. But the ditches from all the years when lead was loaded up in our fuels, they are contaminated. And older houses, anything built before early 70s, you can bet your life there was lead in the paint if it was a quality house, because lead really worked. Paint didn't peel when it had lead in it, and there was a lot of lead. Not just, 1% or 2% in the lead content. And so when houses are demolished, and now it's done in a day or two to crunch down an entire house, we really need to be concerned that construction and demolition landfills are more contaminated than ordinary landfills rather than less. So they need more testing and what have you. What I've been concerned about actually since I was a little boy, but really came to the forefront on another side of things, and all the fires with equipment at the landfill. There's a reason that we use gasoline and diesel fuel as a fuel. It burns like fury. And so does crude oil once it gets started. And we do have a situation that the experience we've had in Saline County and in all of Kansas, and I would assume all of the United States, going back many decades, is that crude oil that's stored, and I visited both with the city manager and with the mayor on this and supplied them with objective reporting that's been in numerous newspapers and what have you, that these crude oil storage tanks can and will both explode and then burn furiously. And we...
About 30 seconds. If you could wrap up.
Out in the country, they're usually in the middle of a wheat field or a pasture. So there's no one there to harm. We still have one working well that's in Salina. There's also one very similar in Lindsborg. That the storage tanks are 200, 250 feet across the corner from Metal Arc Ridge School. And there are houses one house is within 30 feet of oil tanks that, if struck by lightning, stand a very good chance of exploding and then burning. The latest occurrence of that in Saline County was one of the sand pits, Johnson Sand, last November. And I would urge you folks to get together with the people that really know about these things, rural fire department volunteers and the chiefs.
I believe that the city manager has your information as I do, and has discussed with
get
the
together
fire.
and because there are a lot of folks that don't believe that not only can happen and has happened, it continues to. And that's really not
Based on our conversation last week, I relayed that message to the fire chief and the fire marshal. They confirmed that it is not regulated at the local level. It's regulated by the Kansas Corporation Commission. They did go out and inspect all the locations in the city, confirming they were fenced and secured, and they reviewed past incidences of fire. The one thing they found was a mutual aid response in the county. I don't know the date.
I've visited with the new fire chief, who poo-pooed the idea and said it was impossible for cap guns. Thank goodness little kids don't have cap guns. They can still, in Lindsborg, climb up, and if they wanted to, getting inside, I don't know why they'd get over the fence. They could, but it's a gas that explodes. The liquid can then be set off, but it's just it's something that needs to.
Yep, we're aware of your concerns, and we'll continue to address it. Thank you.
Well, just maybe some folks that live in the area will become concerned.
Yep.
Just as we need to with lead.
Right.
Lead in our water.
Thank you. Okay, is there anyone else? Okay, with that, I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Set.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you.